IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are going to get right to it. Trevor, we got a big week of shows coming up, a big week of content coming up, and the reason why is because Notre Dame has a big game this weekend. Notre Dame climbed up a spot in the AP rankings to number 16 after their 25-point win over Miami of Ohio. Louisville won a game this weekend over a Georgia Tech team that was ranked a couple weeks ago and gritted out a win. I think Louisville definitely could say that. It was not their best performance, but they absolutely did what they needed and came away with a 31-19 win in a game where it was just two good football teams, two good, well-coached football teams battling it out. And Louisville was able to come out the win. So they're 3-0, and they jumped all the way up to number 15 in the AP ranking. So it's number 15 versus number 16. Big weekend for Notre Dame, and a lot to discuss about this matchup. So we're going to be doing shows all week breaking down this matchup. Today, we're going to begin talking about some of the news yesterday from Notre Dame with Jaden Mickey and Cooper Flanagan. And what that means for Notre Dame and how they kind of handle those departures and losses for different reasons. Then we'll dive into what this game means for Notre Dame, Trevor, because this is a huge game for Notre Dame in a lot of different ways, both from a micro, macro level, short term this season, who this team is, big picture, all these type of things that they have to that it's just opportunities that are in front of them for this game. And then, of course, we'll then, after we talk about that for a while, we'll then dive into, hey, let's talk Louisville. And today we'll give you guys sort of an introductory level class into Louisville. We'll be back tomorrow to dive deeper into the matchup before the bye. So hold. And of course, Thursday we'll talk keys to victory and make our predictions for the game. But Trevor, man, we'll get started here in a second, folks. But before we do me a solid, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And when you get a free minute today, go over to Irish Breakdown, the premium lounge boards at irishbreakdown.com. There's an hour and 6-minute long video. I promised you guys on Sunday night that I would do a full breakdown of the pass game. I did that. I did everything except the shovel pass and the tunnel screen, which are not really plays that had any impact or evaluative to what we're discussing here. But every single pass play, scrambles, sacks, throws, misses, makes, all of it, to say, hey, look, here's the film. Go into it with an open mind. I break down every play, what went right, what went wrong, and you can kind of get a glimpse of why I felt the way that I did coming out of that game, breaking down the pass game. So you're definitely going to check that out. Again, that I said I would get it done last night. Technically, it was done last night, but it took forever to upload into Vimeo. So by 4:30, I was like, okay, I'm going to bed, and I'm just going to do this in the morning. And so once that got done, got it up this morning, and I think you guys will enjoy it. It's no spin because it's every single play, all 22, every single play. Breaking it down where the quarterback did well, where the quarterback didn't do well, where the O-line did well, where they didn't do well, where the receivers did well, where they didn't do well. And my takeaway was I think this pass game is still a work in progress, but it's a lot closer than maybe even what I thought coming out of the game watching it live. So you'll get a chance to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Now, Trevor, let's dive into this matchup between Notre Dame and Louisville. And one of the things about Notre Dame is you got to worry about yourself first. And part of worrying about yourself is you're going to be down a couple players that have played a decent amount of snaps this season. And so yesterday it was announced, and this one move was not surprising. Cooper Flanagan not playing in this game. I had kind of heard that on Sunday, that he had a little bit of an ankle issue that was going to need to get worked out. And, it kind of comes at an interesting time, which we'll discuss during the show. But you had that news, which we expected. And then the news that I didn't expect, wasn't completely shocked by, but didn't expect it, was that Jaden Mickey was going to redshirt the rest of the season and then transfer after the spring where he got his degree. That was the best news of yesterday, was that Jaden is actually going to stay here through the spring to make sure he leaves Notre Dame with his degree. I am absolutely confident that is something his mother would have been very supportive of, no question about it. So we'll dive into what that means from a football standpoint. I don't really care to give commentary about whether I like the decision or not. It is what it is. It doesn't matter what I think about it. We're going to talk about how it impacts the football team and where Notre Dame goes from here. But that's two quality football players that you're now not going to have on top of Billy Strouth, Ashton Craig, Charles Jagasol, Jordan Patelho. Like, the injuries are starting to pile up a little bit, Trevor, and now Notre Dame is going to have to replace a guy at tight end who was your leader in snaps through the first 4 games. And then, of course, you're going to have to replace one of your rotation cornerbacks. And so let's first start off with the tight end position and what it means for Notre Dame now that they won't have Cooper Flanagan for this matchup against Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, I'm excited, man. Get to talk about some top 20 matchup in South Bend. It's as fun as it is to go and prep about and talk about the Purdue game and the Miami of Ohio game. This was a game that was circled on a lot of people's calendars. So very excited to start diving into it this week with you, Brian. But yes, losing Cooper Flanagan for this game, I think impacts the offense in a handful of different ways. One, like we've talked about before, one of the easiest ways to start getting your quarterback into a rhythm early is getting tight ends involved. And with Mitchell Evans coming off of an injury from last year, looks like he's slowly starting to regain a little bit of the confidence in the knee and the confidence of the offensive coaching staff to where he's seeing more snaps. But it was very much almost like a tight end by committee room from Mike Denbrock in the offense, right? So Cooper Flanagan, he's made impacts in the running game, run blocking game, and he's also made impacts in the passing game. I think the first passing touchdown for Notre Dame all season went to Cooper Flanagan when Angeli threw it to him in the third quarter against Purdue. So it's just, again, it's looking at a less of a talent impact coming into the Louisville game. It's one less target for Riley Leonard to throw to. And Cooper Flanagan is slowly starting to prove himself as a reliable ball catcher. So that one definitely hurts going into this week. He also had the game-sealing run block on Jeremiah Love's touchdown run against Texas A&M. So it is a loss for Notre Dame's offense. I don't want to make it sound as crucial as what it is, but it is a loss nonetheless.
When you look at what Cooper Flanagan has done, he's a solid pass catcher. He hasn't been like an impact guy. The touchdown reception he had that you mentioned, that came against, it came against Purdue's first team defense, actually. And they had run that play earlier in the game, and it was more of a design handoff where they showed that action, and then they came back to it and read it because they knew how Purdue was going to play that. But it's not like he was out here ripping it up in the pass game because, as you mentioned, they hadn't really thrown to the tight ends as much. He did have 3 catches for 53 yards, but here's where Cooper was bringing a lot. He had 2 for 25, caught a nice corner route against Texas A&M. Not that he wasn't performing well in the pass game. He just wasn't getting a lot of targets. But what he was doing was blocking pretty well in the run game. And he was their best run blocker at tight end so far this season, which you were discussing. And right now, your team is built around running the football. And so that's a loss. Like, I would be less concerned about this loss if Mitchell Evans hadn't played the way he had on Saturday. I thought Mitchell Evans had the best blocking game of his career against Purdue. Saturday against Miami, had a couple nice blocks, but some really bad blocks and some bad effort plays, and his body language was a hot mess at times in that game. Like, I was very disappointed with his performance in the game. And I was as disappointed in his performance as he let everyone in the crowd know about his disappointment with the ball being thrown his way. So he let everybody know how disappointed he was in the throws coming his way. So I'm going to let everybody know how disappointed I was in his play as a route runner and blocker on Saturday. And Eli Raridan has not been the same blocker his last 2 years since his knee injury that he was as a freshman before he got hurt. And so that's something that also I look at and say, hey, this is a loss. This is a loss from that standpoint because you've lost your best, so far your best run blocker of the day of the season is out, and your team right now is built around running the football. So they're going to need Mitchell Evans to be the guy he was 2 weeks ago as a run blocker against Louisville. No question, because you're going to have to be able to have your edge blocking is going to be crucial in this game. And that's where not having Cooper Flanagan makes me a little bit nervous about that part of it. So, yeah. That's a concern.
100%. I'm going to be interested to see how much maybe Davis Sherwood gets in the game as almost like that H-back, fullback type of role that he's been in before in previous offenses. Who knows? Because Denbrock's scheme is a little bit different. But there are some blocking alternatives that you can have if Mitchell Evans comes out and has a game like he did last week, which, like we've talked about, he can't. In a game of this magnitude, you can't lay an egg. So, but there are some other options potentially. Not the ideal state, but regardless, the loss of Cooper Flanagan is going to be huge in the run game.
So when you look at the loss, the nice thing about it though, Trevor, is what the answers are primarily. Maybe they trigger Davis Sherwood as a number 2. I mean, the reality is when you've got Mitchell Evans and Eli Redden, you shouldn't have to go that route. You do have Kevin Bauman, who perhaps you could maybe trigger a little bit in some of those run situations. He's a bigger guy, that you can kind of put in there. And so it really is going to come down to 88 and 9 need to be better. That it's as simple as that. If they play to their ability, then the tight end is going to be absolutely fine for Notre Dame. Absolutely fine. But again, that's got to be mean. They got to, like, I guess that's what I was so frustrated by last week is you kind of get some of the inconsistency with some players. But you're talking about a senior who's played a ton of football at Notre Dame, who's on preseason All-American list. You kind of expect him to just play with a little bit better, more consistent effort and be better. But overall, the tight end blocking was really good against Purdue. It was not that great in this game. They're going to need to be on their best against Louisville. There's no doubt about it. So let's talk about the other side of the ball, Trevor. And Jaden Mickey is going down. And the response to this to me has been a little bit missing the boat. And people have said, well, they're going to be fine because look, they've got Leonard Moore was already passing him up, which is kind of true. Not entirely true because Leonard Moore was mostly playing boundary corner and Jaden Mickey is not a boundary corner, but you could play him more there. Jaden was your rotation guy at the second corner spot. He was playing over 20 snaps a game. I believe he has over 80 snaps so far on the season. You say, well, they're going to be fine because they've got Leonard Moore. But here's the reality with Jaden Mickey out, Trevor, your two primary backups at cornerback right now are true freshmen. You do not have any scholarship cornerbacks after that because now not only is Jaden out, but not Christian Gray, because I don't believe that those rumors are true. Chance Tucker is also out because of the knee injury he suffered. So Notre Dame is getting into a position now where as long as everybody stays healthy, they're going to be fine at cornerback. But you're only in game 4 and you're already in a hopefully everyone can stay healthy mode now because you're down to 4 scholarship corners. And I know that what Coach Freeman said about Rod Hurd. No, if you're putting Rod Hurd in at cornerback, it's going to be a problem, in my opinion. So they are now at the point now where they can't suffer another loss at cornerback or they're going to be in trouble. They're going to be in big trouble because you're now down 2 scholarship cornerbacks. One of them by injury, it happens. The other one because the kid just decided he wasn't going to finish what he started with his teammates. I mean, for whatever reasons, whatever. I'm not trying to get into that, but that ultimately is the decision he made. And that puts him in a tough spot and you haven't really played a dynamic pass offense yet. I would say the 2 best pass offenses you're going to face this season, maybe the top 4 pass offenses you're going to face this season are still on your schedule. And one of them is coming to town on Saturday, so it's a loss. It is definitely a loss. Now, are you losing a starter? No. Was Jaden Mickey playing great football? No, but he's still a veteran player that's proven to a degree that can bring value in certain aspects of the game that you no longer have. And yes, even if Carson Hobbs and Leonard Moore both play great as backups, you're still better off with them and Jaden Mickey. And that's a much bigger loss than I think people are talking about, especially if there's another injury.
It's a loss in the short term and the long term, right? Long term, we've talked about it all season long. The goal is to make the playoffs. This is going to be a longer season for Notre Dame, ideally. And I don't want to get into the playoff talk right now, the specifics of it. But in terms of depth, it's going to be huge for the season, right? you want to start using and getting deeper into your bench when you have those games like the Armies and the Navies coming up on your schedule. And with the loss of Jaden Mickey, that kind of puts you at the 2 deep, and that's it. And Notre Dame has been rotating their corners a lot throughout this year to keep people fresh, and which is why we've seen the emergence of Leonard Moore. It's why we saw Carson Hobbs at the end of the game last week against Miami of Ohio, which is really exciting. But to your point, Brian, I look at this like when Logan Diggs transferred out after the 22 season, and it was kind of a polarizing topic of people. They were either Team Audric or Team Logan Diggs, and for people like you and I, we're Team Notre Dame. Whatever makes the team better, I am on board for. And sure, he might not have been playing the best football right now, but to your point, that Notre Dame is one injury away from having to start a true freshman with the bulk of their difficult games ahead of them on the schedule. And that can be kind of an uncomfortable feeling. So losing Jaden Mickey in the short term, it's going to ask Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs to grow up significantly quicker, which it sounds like they have been.
Moore has clearly.
Yes.
Moore clearly has. I mean, Leonard had already passed up Chance Tucker by the time when Chance got hurt. Like, that had already happened. Leonard was having a great offseason. Now Carson Hobbs, he had not passed up Jaden Mickey. And people can spin this, he saw the writing on the wall. He was going to get passed up by Carson Hobbs. No, he wasn't. Carson Hobbs was playing nickel. Like that this was not a situation where he was getting passed up by someone at field corner, right? And so it's like you said, Trevor. I think you nailed it. These freshmen are going to have to grow up in a hurry because, like you and I have talked. Well, I've talked about this a bunch, and you and I have never talked about this on the show. But I've always believed, Trevor, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I have zero problem playing freshmen. I like playing freshmen when they've earned it. I never want to play a freshman because I have to. And Notre Dame is an injury away from having to play a freshman at cornerback out of necessity. And if they want to go more than beyond the starters, they have to play a freshman. And to me, that's a concern. That's definitely a concern.
It is. It's a scary thing to look at, right? Because when you're a true freshman and you've earned that shot to play, to the coaching staff, that means you are ready. Whereas if you have to play out of necessity, that conversation quickly goes from you've earned it and you now are ready to now you have to be ready. And there's a very short window of time to get that player ready. Because, I mean, going through a week of a football program, I mean, you're going from having to take second team reps, you rotate in a little bit with the first team to now your entire world changes and you're starting to take first team reps and you're getting different looks. And on top of everything else, you now become a focal point for an opposing offensive coordinator to target, especially if you're a true freshman. Now, there are instances where that's what bred Benjamin Morrison, right? Clemson comes into town. They are, weighing your options of, hey, we're either going to start picking on Cam Hart or true freshman Ben Morrison. I know which one I'm going after. And Ben Morrison rose to the occasion, and then here we are. But ideally, Notre Dame doesn't get into a situation where they have to start playing true freshmen because it's a daunting thought.
Yep. So that's kind of where Notre Dame is at now in the cornerback position. You're in a very tight spot, and we're going to see how it plays out. Hopefully, we don't have to have a conversation about, well, what do you do now that one of your starters is down? But you're also means that your starters are going to have to play a little bit more snaps now at corner, which. We'll kind of see how it plays out. But Jaden Mickey was a guy that had played 82 snaps. I see some of the comments. He was buried. He was on the bench. It wasn't on the bench. He was averaging like 20. He was averaging 20 snaps a game. He was on pace for almost 250 snaps this season. And so when you take that out of your lineup, that's a loss. That's certainly a loss to your team. And your team is better with Jaden Mickey on the field than not having him on your team at all, in my opinion. So we'll see how he's able to overcome that. But certainly you're getting to some positions now, Trevor, at multiple spots where the depth chart's getting a little bit concerning. It's getting a little bit concerning. Left tackle is one of those spots. You're getting in a little bit of that spot here now at tight end. Because now it's like, okay, the rest of your depth chart behind Cooper is Mitchell Evans, who's had injury problems. Kevin Bauman has had injury problems. Now, the good news is Cooper Flanagan's ankle injury doesn't seem like it's going to be incredibly long-term. And I'll say this, the timing of it is actually like, you don't want him to get injured. But if the timing of it actually works out relatively well for Notre Dame in this regard. Number one, Mitchell Evans is kind of finally getting back into the groove of he can now play full time. If this happened 3 weeks ago, you'd have been in a tougher spot because Mitchell wasn't at a place now where now he's kind of rounding into form and he can maybe give you 15, 20 extra snaps. Eli Raridan is getting to that point where he can give you 15, 20 extra snaps. So those two guys can easily take the snaps, the workload without putting them at risk. That's a good place to be. And then the second one is, yes, he's going to miss the Louisville game, but you got the bye week coming up next week. So if he needs, because ankle injuries can be problematic if you try to rush him back. So now you go through the whole next week of just rehab and rest. That's all he needs to worry about next week is rehab and rest without the fear of missing a game. And so now you actually have a little bit extra time to get Cooper back before he has to play another game after this weekend. So in that regard, Trevor, I think the timing of it, if it was going to happen, this is actually decent timing, because even if it would have happened, let's say in this game, and but now you don't know that he's going to definitely be back by the time Stanford comes to town. Now there's a much higher chance of him being able to do that. And that's the key. So I do think the timing works out well.
Yeah, the timing works out really well for Billy to come back, and definitely going to be a huge impact when he does return. But I think you hit the nail on the head. The depth chart is starting to look eerily thin, especially when you start running through the injury report, and knowing that Notre Dame is just going into week 5 really starts to put that thought in the back of your head that you don't want to creep in, but that injury bug, because I know a lot of people will start talking about it. We're going to start seeing, I know we talk all the time about, the offensive line struggling, time to see how Joe Rudolph is. I think now we're going to start to see what kind of strength and conditioning coach Lauren Landau is, and see how he's going to be able to handle the performance of the team. So I think all of those things combined are going to be interesting. The tough part for a coach is you still have to go out and play a physical game at 100% of your capabilities, and you can't think about injuries. So, but kind of that Sunday to Thursday, Sunday to Friday is when you have to take those into consideration. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, you can't say, well, man, if only we had Cooper this weekend. Well, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on what you do have. Man, if only we had Patello this weekend, okay, you don't. So what are you going to roll with? And that's kind of where they are. So that's going to do it for segment number 1, Trevor. Before we hit on to segment number 2, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button. If you have not already done so, make sure you hit that like button. And again, you're going to want to get over and check out that breakdown that we have over there. I do think that was very good. Plus, that took all day yesterday, for me to put together. So just check that out, just for the sheer fact of it make me feel better knowing that a lot of people watched it after I spent my entire day breaking it all down. But it was actually fun doing it, because it is like I said, the part of the reason I did it is because my opinion changed of his performance after breaking down the film. You guys remember we were in a group chat together. I was not pleased with the performance watching it live. Then you go back and you watch the film and you're like, you know what? This is a lot better than I thought. It's not there yet. Like somebody on the chat, guy that I love, was like, I disagree with you. I'm like, well, what exactly are you disagreeing with? Like, he still made mistakes. Well, I'm pretty sure I said that in the breakdown, that there was definitely some things that need to get fixed and corrected. But there's some other things. And no, the film is not on YouTube, because I don't put any of that stuff on YouTube. It is on our premium board. So you have to be a member of the board to check that out. So, I think it was good stuff. It was very good stuff. All right, Trevor. So let's dive into the next part of today's show, and we're going to talk about what this game means for Notre Dame. This is a huge, huge game. Obviously, when you talk about it, it's not just the ranked on rank. So we're talking about a game on Saturday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. Notre Dame is a 6-point favorite, which I was a little surprised by. It was 6.5. It's now down to 6. And Louisville comes in ranked 15th in the country. Notre Dame is ranked 16th in the country. I was just kind of, and again, I'm not a bettor, so I don't have any knowledge to back. It's just more of a gut. I thought it'd be like a 3.5-point game. I thought it'd be kind of like the spread where A&M was favored over Notre Dame. It's at home, but the other team's ranked higher and all that kind of stuff. And but it's a 6-point spread. And Notre Dame's coming off of their win. Obviously, Louisville coming off of a 12-point win over Georgia Tech. And it was a very good football game, very back-and-forth football game. Yeah. Georgia Tech went up early. Then Louisville ran off 17 straight. Then Georgia Tech came back and tied it. And then, Louisville went back ahead. And it was a closer game than a 12-point margin. But I did feel watching it that Louisville was the better team. It wasn't like, oh, man, like they caught this break and that break. So, like, Louisville's first touchdown came on a fumble return, but it was a bad play by the quarterback, but it was also a great play by the Louisville defense. And he made a bad play because they were swarming him. So I was like, yeah, okay, that was a bad play, but you forced that bad play, And then their last score to kind of put the game away was the return of a blocked field goal. Well, you had to block it first before you could return it for a touchdown, So was impressed with Louisville. They hadn't been challenged their first two games at all. I mean, they played two really bad football teams to start the season off. And so they got challenged on Saturday by Georgia Tech, and they stepped up and answered that challenge. And so continue to be impressed by this Louisville football team, Trevor. But this is a big moment for Notre Dame. And we're going to look at this really in all aspects. And the biggest one is, we'll get into how it impacts the season right now. But the biggest one is, this is a Notre Dame team that's 3-1 and ranked number 16 in the country. And if you were to kind of take a temperature of the fan base and the coverage of the team, you'd think this team was going through another 2016 season. Yeah. And I understand why, because I don't agree with a lot of it, and I don't agree with the angst of it, but I also understand it because of the expectations that you had on the team. And even in some of the wins, they didn't necessarily look great. Like Saturday, they did not play great football. They just kind of out-talented that other team. And so you're looking at this team, so yeah, they're 3-1, yeah, they're ranked 16, but they're not playing the way that they should be. I think some of the reactions to that are a little bit too harsh. It's one thing to be critical of it. It's another thing to go to that degree. But I understand the frustration. And that's part of what makes this game so important. Because this is not, and I've said this, there's not a singular game on the season that just wipes out either Northern Illinois or tells us, okay, Notre Dame has turned the corner. And the reason I say that is not because none of these teams are good. This is a very good football team. USC showed in their loss to Michigan, they're still a really good football team. Yeah. That was a very well played game. It's not so much that it's okay, but we don't know who's going to show up week to week. Like, you could beat Louisville by 30 on Saturday and then go beat Stanford by a field goal, or even lose to Stanford, because this is a better Stanford team than the one that beat you 2 years ago. And I think that's really why I say no one game says that's been fixed. I don't care if you beat Louisville by 50, it doesn't say that, because it comes a week after you kind of sleptwalk through beating Miami of Ohio. And so, but what it does, however, is it starts to, I think a lot of people to turn the emotional corner and say, okay, the more you play well, the more you win, the more the Northern Illinois game is the anomaly. And right now, that wound is still real fresh, right? Yeah. Like this past weekend, I got a new infection in that wound by how they played against Miami of Ohio, right? Like, so it's still healing. I get it.
Yep.
You go out and win this game. I don't care if it's by a point or 40. Just play well and show that, hey, you're a good football team. Then I think that helps you kind of turn the corner a little bit emotionally as a fan base, but even more importantly as a team. Like, hey, guys, we are a really good team. When you're talking about the guys in the locker room and you talk about, hey, we are a really good team. We are a good football team. And we showed it on Saturday. Now let's build on that. I think that's obviously what's at stake. But if you lose this game, then the toxicity that surrounds your program, I don't know that it goes away the rest of the year. I mean, it sucks to say that, but I'm trying to be realistic. I don't know if you can kind of recover your momentum the remainder of the year because of what's left on your schedule. And part of that's not your fault, because Florida State sucks, and that would have been a chance to get a late season top 10 win, those type of things. But, it was never as bad as the emotional reactions were making it seem. But even the wins are still not as good as what this team should be. And now you get a chance to go out there this weekend and say, hey, listen, we're going to show you who we are. And they are going to show the world who they are this weekend. The only question is, Trevor, but what story are they going to tell? right? Like, so we're going to know who Notre Dame is after this weekend, folks. That's not me taunting they're going to smash Louisville. That's me saying one way or the other, we're going to find out who this football team is, and it's going to have a big impact on how people are going to feel for the next several months. And maybe that's fair, not fair. But it's a fact, in my opinion.
I talked about it after the Northern Illinois game during Purdue week, and Notre Dame, for them to start this almost recovery process, there's going to be multiple steps in it. Because to your point, Brian, there's going to be no game throughout the rest of this regular season where we're going to get to December and we're like, Northern Illinois, what happened? We're always going to remember it. The opposing teams that Notre Dame has on the schedule are going to remember it, right? So let's just call that a constant. What Notre Dame did to Purdue, I think, helped buy back some of the team. And I'm not here to say that they were losing buyout from the team, but what Notre Dame did to Purdue was that, you go on the road to a Big Ten team. It's a rivalry game. It's historic. There's a trophy that you're playing for, and you beat them by 59 points on the road. I think that goes back and shows you that you are a good football team again. What the Louisville game has the opportunity to do for you as a program is start to buy back some of the fan base, because there is a little bit of, no, it's definitely not as bad as what some people make it out to be, but it's also not where we want it to be. You know what I mean? So that's, to me, what is at stake at the Louisville game, because there's a good amount of people on this team that remember what Louisville did to them last year on a national stage under the lights. And there's an opportunity for Notre Dame to come out fired up. And I don't want to preach revenge tour, because I think there are some players and coaches that are a little bit more disciplined than that for, this whole season to be about beating Louisville because of what happened last October. But I think there has to be a little bit of that. Marcus Freeman even brought it up in his press conference that sometimes you kind of have to go to that dark place to start finding the juice somewhere. And, I think if Notre Dame is able to play the way that we all believe that they can and have shown flashes of them being able to, they're going to start to course correct a lot of the mistakes that were made last week against Miami of Ohio. And they're going to slowly start putting Miami of Ohio or Northern Illinois in the rearview mirror. And it's going to get farther and farther away. It's something you're never going to forget. But
the fans won't.
Good win. Sure,
the fans won't. But I do think the team puts it behind them if they play well Saturday. And I think that's obviously more important than what we think and what fans think, right? I know fans don't think that what we think is more important, but what matters is what the team thinks, Trevor. And to your point, and the revenge factor is interesting, because as a coach, I kind of like using that, but you got to use it the right way.
Sure.
I'm using it as a little extra motivation. Like, and Sean Davis and I have talked about this. I still remember being there last year and watching Howard Cross stand there and watch Louisville celebrate. And you're thinking, like, this is going to be something that he clearly remembers. Like, he's not putting this aside. He remembers this one. But then you watch how Trevor's played so far this year, and you're like, yeah, but I don't know how much he's kind of taken away from this one. You know what I mean? Like, what is he learning in this one? And you say, but is this the game that maybe it's the wake-up call for him? And so there's just a lot of different aspects to it where I'm always looking for a little bit of an edge with a football team. And that was one of the things I hated about Brian Kelly is he would completely spend all week tamping down that there was anything to play for in this game other than just it's another Saturday. And that's a mistake. Just like it's a mistake about making your entire preparation be about revenge. You got to find that sweet spot in there. But Notre Dame got embarrassed by Louisville last year.
Yeah.
And not just with the convincing 13-point loss, which the game was closer than that for a while, but then the way the game played out in the second half, it wasn't that close. Like, first half, it was two teams not playing well, two great defenses, two offenses struggling. Second half, it was, both defenses still played well, but one offense just completely went in the tank. And it wasn't Louisville's. You know what I mean? And so I do think there needs to be something along those lines with this team, but you've got to make sure that it's still about, hey, you're going to go in there, you're going to play hard. Because, like somebody just said, 5 turnovers will have that effect. That's not even what bothered me about last year's game. What bothered me about last year's game is your offensive line went into that game and physically got their butts handed to them. You didn't even compete in that regard. You had dumb penalties. Like, look, 5 turnovers and all. It's true. You don't have a hands to the face by your right tackle who should never do that. I mean, that negates a 30-yard bomb that it was what, 17-10. That pass to Mitchell Evans gets him into scoring range, and all of a sudden you go down there and score. It's a different ball game. It's the drop pass by Chris Tyree in the end zone when it was it was tied 7-7. You had just forced a fumble. Cam Hart had just forced a fumble, and you got a guy open. Great play call. Chris Tyree open in the end zone. He drops it, and you settle for a field goal. And it was that your team was not locked in. Your team was not focused. Your team didn't fight enough in this game. And even the defense, as well as they played for 3 quarters, they kind of buckled late in that game and gave up a couple big runs and let Louisville bury them. So your hope, and the reason I bring this up, because there's a lot of guys coming back from last year's team still on this football team. Yeah. And I just kind of feel like if you're a true competitor, yeah, you got to focus on what's in front of you now. But if you're a true competitor, I got to think last year's game is still in your mind. Like when the Lakers and Celtics played in, what was it, 80? The Celtics beat the Lakers in 84. You don't think that like 3 years later, the next time they played in the finals, even 3 years later, that Magic wasn't thinking about 84? You know what I mean? Like, of course he was. And so that to me is just kind of, if you're a great competitor, it shouldn't dominate necessarily everything you're doing. I've had a picture of Jeff Brom on my wall ever since that game. No, I mean, it shouldn't be that. That's, you might need to see somebody about that, but there's got to be a sense of, man, I'm digging deep because I got embarrassed by this team last year. Like, I want to see Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan come out with something to prove, not just because they're now starters and they were backups, because they watched film of last year's game saying like, what the heck was that? That's embarrassing. I want to rewrite this script a little bit. That's where I'm coming from, Trevor. Because one of the big questions I have with this football team is what drives them? What gets them fired up? Sure. Do we know that right now? Yeah, they came out against Purdue pissed off, and we didn't. And I said, I want to see this team and it lasted 1 week, and then we came and watched this team. Now, did it last 1 week because the players are a little bit too focused on what's coming next week? We're gonna find out. And I hope that that's what it was, which is also human nature, right? You kind of understand, you know what? They were thinking about a different team in red and white, and it wasn't Miami. They were thinking of a different team with a bird logo, and it wasn't a Red Hawk. Okay, cool. Then come out and back that up. So, like, that's something else, Trevor, is I think we're going to learn something about the competitive spirit of this football team by how they perform on Saturday.
Couldn't agree more. If you're a ball player, man, and you just know that this team, where, it's not the same exact Louisville offense from last year, but just like Notre Dame, Louisville has a good amount of players that were on that same team last year. And for me, when I think about it, if somebody were to beat me like that, sometimes what I do is I put myself in the mindset of the other person. And I start to think, like, what do they think of me? I'm just a pushover. And I'm just, if I'm somebody like Howard Cross and I'm somebody like Riley Mills, and I just think back to, man, this offense put up 185 yards on me on the ground, almost at will. Especially at certain points in the game. And if I'm doing that, I take that personally. Not to take the Michael Jordan quote from The Last Dance, but I do take that personal. Because the reason why is because I think about what the other offensive line thinks about me. It's like, oh, we're going up against Riley Mills and Howard Cross. Yeah, cool. Let's just run for another $185 again. That gets to me. And so that's what
we moved them off the line last year. We drove them off the line. They're not that good. Right. That guy's not an All-American. We dominated him. Right.
Like, I think about Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan. Notre Dame had 44 rushing yards against Louisville last year. If I'm Ashton Gillette and if I'm, TJ Quinn and all these guys on defense, I'm thinking to myself, it's like, oh, these guys, cool. Let's just hold them to under 50 yards again. I start to take that personally. And I mean, I get fired up about it, man. I think that I take that personally as a fan. I think about what a Louisville fan would say to me about something like that. It's like, oh, we got you guys. It gets me fired up. And so to your point, I think we're going to start to see how this Notre Dame football team responds to that kind of mindset, which
it's very excited for. It's a coaching thing too, Trevor. And it's like, because I mean, if you're a human being and you're a competitor, you have that. I hope that Marcus Freeman doesn't purposely push back against that this week. And like, we've been there. Like, my 4th year as a coach. So I was 4 years removed from college, and I'm coaching against my alma mater. Things did not go well there. I was a starter, redshirt sophomore year, coming back the next year. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. Dude basically benched me before we even got into full pads because I couldn't run his triple option offense. So then we go out to our scrimmage. He puts a freshman kid he recruited. We go out to the scrimmage against a D2 school. I outplay that kid. I'm starting him. But it was like one of those things where, like, the moment we lost a game, I was getting benched. It was like, it was just waiting on me to fail. And so I had some hard feelings about that. I mean, you basically kind of screwed me out of my career is how I felt at the time. We played them 4 years later. Do you think I was like, hey, man, that's 4 years ago, I'm not worried about it? No, I was like, I'm going to show you something. Mm-hmm. And so we beat them at their place, first round of the playoffs by 11. They were undefeated in their season. You don't think that I had a little something extra that week of practice? You don't think when I'm coming up with all these plays that we're going to rip them up? That was the game I broke it down a couple weeks ago where we were doing stuff where I knew that D coordinator because I played for him. He was the D coordinator when I played. I knew how he played. I knew how his defense worked. So that's why we were doing twins left, because I knew they were going to go corners over. Byron Westbrook's brother was a corner on that team, by the way. And so we knew they were going to go corners over, knew the safety. I played with their safety. He was a freshman when I was a senior. I knew he couldn't cover me still at that day. So we did some things. So like I was pissed. I coached pissed that week, and we ripped them up. Threw for like 280 some yards in that game. We didn't throw that much. And I remember walking across the sideline. Players dumped water on me because they knew I wanted it that week, and there was a lot at stake. And the head coach, my head coach, who I played for, guy that I respect, we have a much better relationship now, Sherman Wood, than we did at the time. But he came up, he's like, I told him all week you were going to have something for them, and they needed to be ready for you, and they weren't. And I said, you're darn right. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that's because I was still pissed. That's a competitor in me. I'm going to show you what you missed out on by not doing right by me. Now, this is a different circumstance because this team just embarrassed you. But somebody in the chat said, like, the narrative about Marcus Freeman is, how good of a coach is he really? Because we watched Jeff Brom coach circles around him last year. Where's your competitiveness too? That's why I don't want to see him tamp this down. I want to see him I like the pissed off Marcus Freeman. That's my favorite version of Marcus Freeman as a coach, not as a human being. Like, I don't want him coming over my house pissed off. Not me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm catching the L on that one. You know what I mean? But I like the pissed off coach version of Marcus Freeman, because when he's pissed off, his team plays pissed off. Mm-hmm. And when this team plays pissed off, Purdue found out, when this team's got a little bit of an edge to it, it doesn't go well for you. And so to me, that's what I want to see him. Okay, y'all want Jeff Brom as coach? Y'all think Jeff Brom's the man? All right, let me show you what I got. And so those are all things where if this team has that competitive fire, you don't think the first time Nick Saban went up against Kirby Smart, there wasn't a little bit of extra something in that week of preparation for him, and vice versa. And that's what I'm saying is, if this team doesn't come out and play like they're a team that got embarrassed by this team last year, then that tells me there's a much bigger problem in this locker room. On the flip side, if this team does come out and play with fire and does bring it to Louisville and show all the things we know they're capable of, that tells me there's something burning in there, Trevor. They just got to figure out how to kind of turn it up a little bit more regularly. And that's why I say we're going to learn a ton about this football team, because it's partly about this squad, but it's also partly about what are you developing in your culture with this football team. And it could be something as maybe this team felt so good about themselves that they need these type of challenges to really step up to the plate. That's a theory, but it's a theory that we're going to get tested this weekend. So there's so many different ways that you look at this and say, man, we're going to learn so much about this football team, based on just how they play, just the energy, the fire, all those type of things. And that's why I say this is a big game, and we haven't even gotten to the implications for both teams in this game, which we're going to get into next. But that's my thing is, Trevor, we're going to learn a lot about what you have in here on Saturday from a coaching standpoint and from a player standpoint. Like, you don't think Al Golden, like, I got to think Al Golden's the kind of guy. I don't think Al Golden got to where he is now without having a little bit of fire He played tight end back in the 80s. Those dudes
Yeah.
were tough. Like
Yeah.
they were I mean, I know he caught it, but those dudes had to battle. I gotta
Mhm.
think he's like, Jeff Brom did a couple things on me last year. I didn't like it. I'm gonna show Jeff Brom. I mean, I gotta think that there's got to be something. And I know the coach. No, we're just focused on. Okay, that's fine. You can say that. You need to say that. There's no
Totally.
reason to give Louisville bulletin board material. Give
Yeah.
me all the, hey, look, man, it's just another game. We got, we're worried about Notre Dame. And to a degree, that's true. But I gotta think that there's a little something there. And that's what I'm saying is like, I want to see that, because if the coaches don't have it, then guess what? The players won't have it either. And so that's why I say, Trevor, man, right now, we're going to learn a ton about this football team and who they can be and who they are. Absolutely, we're going to learn a lot about this team and what's right here and what's right here.
Yeah. We're going to learn about who they are as a program, as a whole. I want to see everybody from top to bottom fired up on Saturday, right? I want to see the sideline going crazy. I mean, I remember back in 2022 when Notre Dame was playing Clemson at night and they get the blocked punt and the sideline erupts like they just caught a Hail Mary for a win, right? Like, I want to see some of that. I want to see a team that is starting to inherit the mentality of what Lou Holtz said. We're Notre Dame and you ain't. And I want to see a football team that starts to, I guess, to go off of what Marcus Freeman preaches to his team, to start challenging things and not just internally, like challenge the stereotype of what Notre Dame football is, right? Challenge that narrative of what's been laid out before you guys. And now is the perfect opportunity to do it. Because I think there is a little truth to, yeah, sure, you can go beat Purdue by 59 points like you did. Nobody's going to be like, they're back. You could go and not allow a touchdown to Miami of Ohio and win by 25 points at home. Nobody's going to look at that and be like, yep, Notre Dame's back, baby. The Texas A&M week, Notre Dame is back. Now you have the opportunity to go out and do that. I want to see the Marcus Freeman that's getting in the face of his offensive linemen in the tunnel before the game, getting ready to run out there.
Because it was real, Trevor.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's the thing, is that wasn't faked.
Yes.
That was real.
Yes. Like, I want to see that authenticity from him. I need to see that. And I think the team needs to see it. The fans need to see it. Because that's going to show everybody that it's, like, this isn't a guy that's just going to lay down. It's almost like that leave no doubt moment in Remember the Titans of like, yo, hey, they're not getting another yard on us. That needs to be the mentality.
That's a
that you come to this
mindset.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I think the team needs. That's the next step in this recovery process that we've talked about after the Northern Illinois. You now have the skill set mindset of, yes, we're Notre Dame. We have the skill to compete with anybody in the country. Now it's a mindset shift of, we have the skill to back it. Now we need to play like nobody can touch us. And that's what you have to do. That's how you have to prepare.
Right.
Not just play. That's how you have to prepare.
I mean, the best teams that I played on, Trevor, coached on, and the best teams I've coached against, it was almost like they weren't even going into the game thinking about you. They had I like to use Larry Bird references, but there's the story about how Larry Bird went into they were on a West Coast trip, and they're going to play Portland, and Larry Bird basically says, "I'm going to play left-handed in this game." So basically, outside of free throws, he basically did everything left-handed for the first 3 quarters. And he scores like 47 points. And you talk to his teammates, and it's like, you take the trash talk aside, that he needed those challenges. That was him challenging himself, saying, I can do it. You know what I mean? Like, because you're always looking for those things to kind of fire yourself up. You're always looking for those little extra edge things. And so it's not even like, hey, we want to go out against Miami of Ohio and they're not that good. It's like, okay, then don't let it be about that. Let's say, hey, let's see if we can score 60 in back-to-back games. And play with that kind of fire, because we want to show people this. And that's the thing that I do get a little bit concerned about with this football team, is they're not as internally motivated as I think great teams need to be.
Sure.
Now, that doesn't mean it can't change, but that's part of the issue, is they do need some of that external motivation. And this week you have it.
Yeah.
And if you don't tap into that, then it's just kind of like, I don't know who this team really is, right? Or no, it's hey, we now know who this team is. And it's not good. And they're going to have to fix that part. But if they do come out, it's a step in that. It's just another step in the right direction, but it's a chance for a much bigger step this week. against this Louisville football team. Because like you said, Trevor, man, if you're a competitor, you don't just move on from that. You don't. I mean, I'm watching Notre Dame come out last year against Stanford, and Marcus Freeman is trying to destroy that team. You don't think that factored at all? I mean, what do you have to prove against Stanford? I mean, you're not going to the playoff. They're terrible, but you're out there trying to I'll say run it up, because I don't think he was running it up. Just like you could tell they wanted to bury that football team. I'm watching him against Purdue, a school that fired him with his third string quarterback in the game throwing bombs.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's a mindset thing. That's why I say I like the pissed off Marcus Freeman. So I have to think, and I have to think that he's going to give us all the right phrases in the press conferences and say all the right things. And he should. Jeff Brom is not someone you want to give bulletin board material to, folks. I'm going to tell you that right now.
No.
And because Jeff Brom is someone who respects Notre Dame. But on today in practice, tomorrow in practice, Thursday in practice, I want to see a little bit of an edge from this football team. And it starts at the top. And then, Mike Denbrock also. A little bit chippy Mike Denbrock. I didn't come here to average 28 points a game against MAC teams. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think this team needs that. And we're going to find out how well the players respond to that this week. And I'm excited to see what they're going to be. Because let me ask you this. Do you feel like if they come out of this game and play really well, now really well against Louisville can get you a 10-point win, right? Yeah. So it's not so much about the margin where you're just man, they were the more physical team. They were the more fired up team. Like, yeah, Louisville got their plays because A, they got really good players, and B, they got really good coaches.
Yeah. I
mean, I've said this before. I think Jeff Brom's one of the best coaches in college football. And you're seeing, look how bad Purdue was before they hired him. Look at how bad Purdue has been since he left.
Yep.
And then you look at what he did. You know what I mean? While he was there, no, he only went 8-4. I'm like, dude took Purdue to the Big Ten title game in this era.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He's a great coach. So it's not a game you expect them to win by 3 touchdowns. I mean, could they? Sure, of course they could. I mean, Purdue beat Ohio State by 4 touchdowns. I mean, stuff happens, right?
Sure did.
But it's more so about you play well. You're clearly the better team. And I felt that about the Louisville Georgia Tech game. I mean, Georgia Tech battled their butts off. They played hard, but it was obvious kind of from early on that Louisville was the better team, and they played like the better team. And I feel like if you see that from this team on Saturday, you go into the bye, you now have a whole extra week to let that soak in, and you feel like, okay, now we hope that this team can kind of come out of that break with that much needed momentum. That's what you're hoping for on Saturday. But I will say this, I have no concern about this team coming out flat on Saturday, because the one thing we can say about Marcus Freeman is his teams never come out flat in these types of games. So, well, what about Louisville last year? Clemson last year. Clemson was unranked. Well, I should say this. There's only been one exception to that, where his team came out flat, and that was Louisville last year. But like Clemson last year was an unranked team, minus 8 starters. That was clearly not a focus. Notre Dame just thought they were going to roll over them.
Oh, yeah.
Like, now they've lost some of these games, but they didn't come out like 2022 against Ohio State. Ohio State was clearly the better team. But Notre Dame played hard in that game. Even the Duke game last year, the offensive line stunk, but the defense played their butts off in that game. Right? I mean, Mitchell Evans went off in that game. Audric, I mean, if the offensive line just plays solid football against Duke last year, that's a 20-point win. That's how bad they were. I didn't think the team was flat, because I thought the defense shut Duke down. The only game where the only exception was the Louisville game last year. And that's why I kind of feel like I expect them to kind of, I expect to at least see a little something. You got something to prove. You got a lot of people doubting you right now. You have something to prove. And I want to see if that's the case. But it's not the only storyline this weekend, Trevor. There is absolutely postseason. You could say, I don't want to talk about playoff, but we're going to talk about playoff now. Now is the part to talk about the playoff. You can say, well, Notre Dame's not a playoff team. And right now, they're not, because they're the 16th team in the country. But if you're going to be a playoff team, this is the kind of game that you need to win. And this is true for both teams. Because like for Louisville, you've got two chances to get in the playoffs. You either win your league or you have a resume strong enough to where you can be the second team, maybe third team in the ACC to get in. The way the ACC has played so far this year, I don't know that you're going to get a third team in. It's going to be tough. And for Louisville, this is one of those things that this weekend does two things for them. Number one, if they can win this game, it's a huge resume builder for them. Hey, we went on the road and beat a top 25 team at their place, right? So now Louisville gives themselves a little bit of a buffer if they were to drop a game between now and the end of the season, right? Where they now still have a pretty good resume. The other part is it gives the ACC a much needed boost because the ACC has actually had some pretty big wins this season. You know, you look at Texas A&M Miami going on the road and pounding Florida. Yeah. You know, you look at but they've also had some pretty bad losses. North Carolina getting blown out in a basketball score by James Madison this past weekend. I mean, they've had some rough. Virginia Tech getting beat at home or actually going on the road and losing to Vanderbilt. So they've had some rough losses so far. They need this kind of win to hopefully reinvigorate their reputation a little bit. Because right now it's looking like you're going to get one guy in. You know what I mean? One guy in or one team in. And if you're going to change that, these are the kind of wins that you need. So both teams right now, Trevor, are in a situation where this game is going to have huge implications on what your resume is going to look like at the end of the season. I don't think Notre Dame is going to have the overall resume to get into 10-2, especially if you lose this game. Now, I think this game the only way Notre Dame gets in it with two losses, including this loss, because this may end up being the best team you play all year rankings-wise. It's going to be them, USC, or Texas A&M. Right now, they're ranked second highest behind USC. But you look at it and say, two losses against this schedule of what it's turned out to be because of how bad Florida State is, I don't know if that's going to get you in unless there's just a bunch of three-loss teams you're competing with. So they're not completely eliminated out of a 12-team situation if you lose this weekend, but it becomes incredibly difficult. Like they're going to need so much help the rest of the way, like so much help. It's almost like you're going to have to back your way in at that point in time. Kind of like, what was it 2 years ago with Ohio State? Ohio State they got lucky getting in because it was like, Clemson lost late in the year, Tennessee lost late in the year, like USC lost late in the year. Remember, they lost if USC beats Utah in the Pac-12 title game, Ohio State's not in the college football playoff in 2020.
Yep.
Now, they made the most of it when they got there and took Georgia down to the wire, but like they needed a lot of help to get into that. And Notre Dame would be like the 12-seed version of that if they have two losses. And so you're talking about by the end of September, your season's basically for all intents and purposes of who you want to be as a football team. And as Andrew Gilmore points out, it'd be your second home loss, right? And so you say, okay, your season's all but done when it comes to reaching the goals that you should have as a football program. That is not a good place to be when you're in year three. So I think from a resume standpoint, Trevor, this is a huge game for both of these teams. And that factors into this matchup as well, because Notre Dame both teams have a chance to make a giant statement this weekend with how they play.
Absolutely. The playoff implications are huge for Louisville on a conference level and for Notre Dame at a national scale. I think we can all agree that if Notre Dame runs the table and goes 11-1, they're in the playoffs. It's just a question of where. Dropping a game to Louisville, not only does it make it, I mean, I don't want to call it impossible because nothing is impossible in sports. We've seen so many things happen. Just makes it so hard for them to get into the playoffs. I just for fun, I went through this morning and I looked at who's ranked ahead of Notre Dame right now, and I looked at the rest of their schedule. And I will say it is doable. Like there is a scenario.
There's a lot of potential losses in front of people. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, Michigan still has left to play. I think they still have to play Nebraska. They still have to play Ohio State. They still have to play Oregon. Yep. LSU still has to play Bama. They have to play Oklahoma at Oklahoma. They have that, so there is a scenario where that happens, but that's not something that you want to bank on because I think you brought it up in one of the shows that we did post Northern Illinois. And you said that you had a buddy or somebody that you were talking to that said, now that Notre Dame has lost to Northern Illinois, their destiny's kind of out of their hands. And to which
Yeah,
I think
somebody
you
said that
rebutted.
to me, and I said,
Yeah,
"No, if Notre Dame runs the table, it's almost impossible for there to be that many teams with 0 or 1 losses ahead of them just because all the teams that are gonna be contending all play each other." That was
yeah,
my point.
yeah.
2
Totally. I mean,
losses, and now he and I are on the same page.
absolutely. Excuse me. I mean, even looking at the top four, I mean, Alabama still, or top five, Alabama still has to play Georgia and Tennessee, right? They still have to play LSU, who's still ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I think they have to play Missouri, who's also ranked ahead of Notre Dame. So there are going to be some losses that come organically on the schedule ahead of Notre Dame, but that's not something that you can bank on. Because
Right.
by no stretch of the imagination do I believe that the committee is going to put a 9-3 LSU team above an 11-1 Notre Dame team.
Not
I'm just
happening.
not
Like,
going to believe that.
that's not even a conversation we need to waste time on. If they're 11-1, they're in.
Totally.
Like, I know there's people saying, but they're in. But that one game difference
Mm-hmm.
is the difference between, okay, you're an 8 seed and you're out. It's one game. And so it's good that your season's not over with after 1 loss. You have
Mm-hmm.
time to overcome that. But 2 losses and you're done. I mean, it's going to be like if Georgia goes 9-3 against their schedule, they should get in over a 10-2 Notre Dame team if Notre Dame loses this game, because what are the wins that Notre Dame can point to and say, hey, hey, we're a really good football team based on what? Well, I mean, did you see what we did to Virginia? Did you see what we did to Stanford? Did you see what we did to that 2-7 Florida State team when they came to our place? Where if Georgia loses, let's say Georgia loses this weekend to Alabama, loses at Texas, and loses at Ole Miss, they would still have a win over Tennessee. They would still have a win over Clemson, which are going to be 2 better wins than anything Notre Dame can have if they lose to Louisville.
Yep.
Right? So
yeah. Yep, I agree. Which is just what makes this game against
now,
Louisville
if you're going to tell me that I'm sorry, some of the
No.
comments today, if you're going to try to tell me that a 9-3 Georgia team gets in over 11-1 Notre Dame team, you're smoking something. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right. So I know it's like some of you want to be upset. If Notre Dame's 11-1, they're in the playoff. The only question is where are they going to be seated?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just guys, stop. But 10-2 Notre Dame against 9-3 Georgia, because 11-1 Notre Dame means they beat USC on the road. They beat Louisville. They're in. But you lose this game, and this is why this game matters. It's not even just 2 losses. They'd have a better shot getting in by beating Louisville and losing to Stanford, because at least they still have the Louisville win. The committee has shown over and over again that they care more about who you beat than they do who you lost to. Clemson was a number 1 seed in 2017 where they lost to a 4-8 Syracuse team. Right? But they had the wins. That's why this game matters, Trevor, because you don't have a whole lot of chances to have resume building wins. I would argue you've got 2. This and USC. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's why I say you can't afford to lose this game. I mean, like 11-1 Notre Dame in 2021. Do you know how many ranked teams Notre Dame had beaten by the end of the year? Do you know how many teams that they had beaten that were still ranked by the end of the year? The answer is 0.
Yeah.
0. And they were the number 5 team in the playoff rankings. Number 5. Right? So, but you lose this game, now all of a sudden, Trevor, your chances to get, so what, you're hanging your hat on, gee, I really hope A&M keeps winning, and gee, I really hope USC keeps winning. That's not necessarily a playoff resume. You're going to need a lot of 3 and 4 loss teams at that point in time. And that's going to make it a whole lot harder. So that's the practicality of what's at stake here, Trevor. I'm sorry. I got to stop responding to the chat, because some of this stuff, it's almost like you're like, hey, let me see if I can say something that triggers Brian today. Let me see what outlandish thing I can say today. And I think I fall for it way too much. But 11-1 Notre Dame is in. And not only are they in, they're hosting. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's kind of my conversation. That's where I'm at.
No, I hear you, man. I hear you completely. And in this game, it's tough to look at. As a coach and as a player, you want to take it as a 1 game at a time mentality, because when you start to look forward, that's when you don't really prepare the best. Mm-hmm. But you do have to come into this week of saying this is an important game, not only for what happened last year, And not only for, you know, what's happened to you so far this season as a team. It's big on a national scale for you. This game for Notre Dame keeps the hope alive of we can still control our own destiny. And that is what is at stake for Notre Dame. And for Louisville, that it's almost it's weird. It's almost like the opposite. It's more like staking your claim. For Notre Dame, it's more like having to like restake your claim. Because let's call a spade here. Notre Dame started out the season as the 7th ranked team in the country and then moved up to 5th. So it's two different narratives going at it here, but both are big for each team. For Notre Dame, getting out of here with a win is going to be crucial.
It's important. And so let's wrap it up here, Trevor. What are we talking about with this game? What's at stake for this game? Practically speaking, resume builder.
Yep.
Big time resume builder. Within this season, big time momentum. 3rd win in a row, right? You're now 3-0 against Power 5 teams. The good news for Notre Dame is if they win this game, the best part about the remainder of their schedule, no more MAC teams. Mm-hmm. Now I understand why Notre Dame fans hate playing MAC teams, because Notre Dame struggles with MAC teams, apparently. It's the craziest thing ever. You struggle to beat a bad Ball State team in 2018. You barely beat Toledo in 2021. You didn't play great against Central Michigan last year. You got beat by Northern Illinois, and you didn't play very well against Miami of Ohio. So, and then you went out and beat Texas A&M by 10 on the road, and you beat Purdue by 59. So it's like maybe you should just start playing all your games on the road against Power 5 teams. Maybe that's what Notre Dame should do. But I think this game does, in fact, however, get some of that momentum back for the team. Forget what we think as analysts and fans, just for the team. I don't think that you look back if they win this game and say, hey, listen, we've put that stuff in the rearview mirror. We're now becoming the team we're capable of. And that's certainly what's at stake for this football team. And then also big picture, we're going to learn a lot about the culture and the heart and soul of this football team too, Trevor, by how they play on Saturday. Because there's a scenario in which they play their butts off and lose. And we will have to come to the grips with this team is not who that we thought that they were, but still say, but I'm not so much as concerned about the future because this team was prepared, blah, 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 blah. They just played a really talented football team that just made more plays than they did, but they fought their butts off. They got to fix this. But if they come out and they just don't play hard like they did last year against Louisville, then you start to say there's something much deeper at stake here than, hey, fix the quarterback position, fix the D tackle position, fix the receiver position, fix the O-line. Hey, they had this injury. It comes down to, like, you could put your 3rd team out there and you're going to get beat by Louisville, right? But did they play hard? That's more of what because I can recruit better players and I can, but if my team's not playing hard, that's a me problem as a football coach. And that's why I say is that's just as because there's also a world in which you out-talent Louisville, but don't necessarily play with the kind of fire you need to go out there and win that game, and they're the ones making mistakes. And even though you won, it's like, okay, yeah, they won, but I'm still seeing some things that have me concerned about who this football team is. So it's not just the results important, but it's how you get there is also going to have a major impact on it and on who this football team is. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, Trevor. Any last thoughts on the magnitude of I'd say this too. There's also some recruiting momentum needed.
Yeah,
because they got some big time players coming on campus this weekend from the 25 and 26 class, and they got a couple very important visitors coming into town in 2 weeks when Stanford comes and visits. And so, there's a lot there too. They need this for momentum in a lot of ways, in my opinion, Trevor. Last thoughts on this before we move into the breaking down Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick, it's to your point, there's more implications to this game than just what gets added to the win-loss column, right? It's how you win. It's how you go out and present yourself as a team and as a program. And I think this is going to be a big momentum push forward for Notre Dame, because if you go in and you take care of business convincingly, not take care of business the Miami of Ohio style, I'm talking about take care of business the Purdue style, like what you did 2 weeks ago to the Boilermakers in West Lafayette in their house. There was after the first drive, there was no doubt in my mind who was going to win that game. It was just going to be a question of how much.
Right.
And if Notre Dame comes in and, like I said in the postgame show for Purdue, it was very businesslike. You came in pissed off. You came in ready. You had a mission. You knew what you were going to do as a team. You knew how you were going to do it. You went out and executed, and it was fantastic.
Right.
You hop back on the bus, and you're back home in 3 hours.
Right.
So that's the mentality that I want to see Notre Dame come out with, from everywhere, from the head coach down to whoever's handing out towels on the sideline. Come out with a purpose and play fired up. And if they're able to do that, I'm 100% convinced that they can walk away with the win, because Notre Dame's roster from top to bottom, you can make the argument, and I do believe that they're more talented than the rest of the opponents on their schedule. Notre Dame is a very talented football team. Now it's just a question of, can you channel all that energy and come out fired up to not just play talented and just kind of be better than everybody else, but feel and know that you're better than everybody else. That's what I want to see, man.
And what we're saying is, not playing like you did against Purdue, where you're clearly the better team, is not going to end with a 59-point win over this football team.
100%.
Right? That's not what Trevor's saying. It's more about where you could, because a 59-point win over Purdue and you play the exact same way against Louisville could only be a 10-point win or a 17-point win. But you're still clearly the best. That's the point, is like you're maximizing your potential against that football team. That's what it means. You know, like against Ohio State, that may only be a field goal difference in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's about, you came out, played your game. You took that was the thing that was the most different about that game and every other game Notre Dame has played so far. To a degree, I think against Texas A&M, I saw this, but definitely not true against the two MAC teams. Against Purdue, Notre Dame came out as a football team, and they took the fight to Purdue in every phase of the game.
Yep.
They did not do that against Miami of Ohio. They definitely didn't do that against Northern Illinois. It was all dinks and dunks, right? And we saw a little bit against A&M. I thought we saw a little bit of that where they were trying to be more aggressive in that game. But the last couple games, you get into these situations where it's almost kind of like what Marcus Freeman said. Well, you know, they make you no, that's playing to not screw up and make a mistake and get upset by this team, right? That's that mentality. But when you come out and you take the fight to them, get them on their heels, this is our house, that kind of thing, to your point, if Notre Dame plays their A game and Louisville plays their A game, Notre Dame's 4-1. Now, if Notre Dame plays their A game, the odds of Louisville playing their A game are slim.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point, right? That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest difference from a mentality standpoint for me, and it's very slight, but the way that I look at it, when Notre Dame came out against Purdue, it was very much, this is what we're going to do, try and stop it. Versus the MAC teams that they played, it was very much like, let's see if they stop this. And it was very passive. It felt like, let's just kind of, I don't want to say throw it against the wall and hope that it sticks, but it was very like, let's see if they stop this. For Purdue, everything felt intentional. Everything felt like, this is what we're doing. Good luck trying to stop it. And for the two MAC opponents that Notre Dame played, it was very much like, try and stop this, I guess. Like, let's see if they do. So very slight, very different, but I mean, the mentality goes a long way.
So that's going to do it for this part of the show, Trevor. We're going to dive into actually looking at Louisville next. But before we do, folks, do us a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And I'm going to say again, if you have not done so, you are missing out by not jumping on the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Guys, it's truly a great deal. It's $4.99 a month. That's not a sign up and get this great rate. That is the rate that we have. And we're $49.99 for a year. If you're someone who's always said, hey, I've always wanted to support Irish Breakdown, but I'm not a message board person, you can still join the message board. There's ways that you can actually just read our content and not get all the other stuff, which I can always talk you through. But it's also the best way to support us if you're someone who wants to support our channel financially. So you go to boards.irishbreakdown.com and check all that out. Got an hour-long breakdown of every pass, non-screen pass play, scrambles, sacks, incompletions, completions, all of it in that video. And it's the reason that I was up until like 5 o'clock in the morning last night, finished that. Took the whole day to get that done, but I think it was definitely worth it. I hope you all think that it was worth it, but you're definitely going to want to check that out. $4.99 a month or $49.99 for a year. You can also join one of the booster clubs, and if you get the booster club, you get some cool IB merch for free. If you join the Shamrock or Blue Club, you get a free IB Club mug that only goes to club members. Trevor doesn't have an IB Club mug. I don't have an IB Club mug. Even my grandma, who I have bought 10 mugs for because she always asks for them, she loves drinking her coffee out of them, she doesn't have an IB Club mug. And trust me, if anyone was going to get one that's not in the club, it'd be my grandma. But she doesn't have one. And if you join the Gold Club, you not only get the IB Club mug, but you also get an IB Club Gold Club t-shirt, color of your choice and style. So you can definitely that. And then as Andrew Gilmore said, I love the spirit. You can ratio my post on the board. He's taking it in good spirit, Andrew. I appreciate that, man. But funny is, Andrew, you've been one of the more positive people the last week. That's how crazy it's gotten, man. Is you're one of the apologists now, man. What are you talking about? But in all seriousness, it is a great community. We not only talk Notre Dame football, but we have prayer requests on the board for people and family. I've put prayer requests on the board. Other people put prayer requests on the board because we are truly a community. We're not just a message board that talks Notre Dame football. We do stick to Notre Dame football. We don't talk about a lot of other non-stuff, but we're a group of people that help each other out. And I'm proud of the community. I was frustrated this last week because of the constant negativity, but that's about football. I'm fresh about the football stuff. If somebody put a post up and, hey, I need help, the people that are just doing nonstop complaining about Notre Dame football, answer the bell just like that and step up. And that's why I love this community. Even though we're not seeing eye to eye on football, what makes this group special is when it comes to our lives, we step up for each other. And that's been one of my favorite parts about this community. But, the chat is like that as well. But that community is a whole different animal. And very, very excited to see how that's grown. So you're going to check that out only at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Trevor. So let's get into talking about Louisville and why is Louisville a team that you have to be prepared to play good football against, because I do think this is a good Louisville football team. Before the season, we talked about the ACC, and I said, look, NC State's the team getting a lot of love. They were a preseason top 25 team. And I said, I don't think they're going to be that good. To the team that I think is getting underrated in the ACC is Louisville. And I loved a lot of the pickups they had this offseason. I thought Tyler Shuck, if he is healthy, is a better quarterback than Jack Plummer. They went out and got Colin Lacey, who was a really good receiver last year. And he hasn't even played yet. He may play this weekend. He hasn't even played yet. You got Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama. Ryan's talking about, and earlier in the post, a defensive lineman they got from Rutgers, who's been a really good player. But then there's also a lot of guys coming back that were really good players for them last year we'll dive into. And, of course, the big thing about it is I think they have one of the best coaches in college football leading the program, Trevor. And if you've been listening to me for a while, you know that Jeff Brom is on my favorite coaches list and what he does. And obviously we saw him him and his staff coach circles around Notre Dame last year, both from a preparation and then inside the game. Now, Al Golden did a great job answering that first touchdown drive, but I've never seen an Al Golden defense on its heels as much as it was schematically that first drive against Louisville last year. It was a masterpiece. Now, because he's a big-time coordinator, Al Golden responded, and they came up with some things, and Louisville only had 7 points at halftime. But that first drive was a masterclass. And so you've got a talented football team, and you have a football team that's got good trench play, skill, a quarterback that can make plays with his arm, and a really smart group of football coaches. It's a legitimate football team. They have earned their ranking so far this year. How good will they be when the season's over with? I don't know the answer to that. Are they an 11-1 team? Are they a 9-3 team? We'll find. Saturday will kind of play a role in that, Trevor. But this is a quality opponent that Notre Dame fans and the Notre Dame team need to take seriously. If you get a win this weekend, Trevor, you beat a really good football. Is this Georgia? Is this Bama? Is this what I said? No, but neither was A&M. To me, this is a better team than even the one you beat in the opener on the road. Now that you're playing them at home, but as a team, this is going to be a tougher opponent for me than what that team was, because this team's also good in the trenches like A&M was. There's a lot more skill talent on the roster at Louisville than there was at Texas A&M, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very veteran team. through the pickups that they made in the transfer portal and who decided to return. I think it's on defense alone, 10 of the 11 starters on defense are juniors or seniors. And through their pickups that they made in the offseason, it kind of made up for what they lost. They lost 2 running backs last year in the to the NFL draft. And obviously Jack Plummer is no longer with them, but they were able to go out and make really good portal additions. And Brian, I think you hit the nail on the head, and they are a very athletic football team. And I think that a lot of people get caught up in like just the name Louisville, and they're just, they always hover around like the mid-teens. This is a good football team, man. This is a team. I mean, I guess I don't have to explain it to a lot of people who are Notre Dame fans, but this is a team that could beat you. This is a really good football team, and they're very well coached. And I think that's what makes them so dangerous. Is a well-coached and athletically talented football team is scary. So I think they're going to do a lot of different things on Saturday to get their playmakers the ball, especially on the offensive side. Going to be interesting to see if Colin Lacey does play, but even if he doesn't, Ja'Cory Brooks has been having his way so far this year. And then another guy that kind of came in out of nowhere in the Georgia Tech game was Chris Bell.
Yeah,
he had a few good plays after the catch.
That crosser that sparked them. That crosser for the touchdown sparked them, because they went in a couple plays, but like Georgia Tech had a lot of momentum at that point in time, in my opinion, and that really sparked them a lot.
Yep,
it did.
And to your point, the quarterback that they picked up, am I pronouncing his last name right? Tyler
Shuck.
Tyler Shuck. Okay.
It's pronounced like Shuck.
Okay.
I don't know how they got that out of Shough.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, when he first came, I was like, Tyler Shaw. You know what I mean? Like, SH, you're thinking though, that, and I'm like, nope, it's Shuck. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Well,
you say, partner.
Well, regardless, Tyler Shuck, Tyler quarterback for Louisville. Yep, Tyler Shuck.
Just say the Louisville quarterback. It works for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whenever I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, I say, the number 90 is a beast, man. That 90 is a handful. Or like Nico from Tennessee. I just Nico. Quarterback Tennessee. What's his name? Nico. Well, what's his full name? It's Nico. That's all I need to know. It's Nico. You know what I'm talking about. I'm with you, man.
I think it just like in the old NCAA games, it's QB9. That's how I'm going to start wording it. But yeah, Tyler Shuck, he's going into his 6th year of college football, and he does have a lot of experience. He takes care of the football. He's a really good quarterback. He was a former top 300 recruit. It's kind of crazy to say, back in 2018, but he's been around a lot, and he has shown that he can put the ball where he needs to. So far this year, I mean, yes, Louisville, their first 2 opponents, they didn't play anybody crazy, but I went back and I watched the Louisville Georgia Tech game. Made a lot of really good decisions. He's a smart quarterback. He's not going to force anything, and now he has a lot of athletes surrounding him.
Yeah. I mean, Trevor, you talk about how they didn't play anybody any good the first 2 games. Well, his highest yards per attempt average and highest quarterback rating so far was against Georgia Tech, not Austin Peay, not Jack. I mean, he threw for more yards against Jacksonville State. That's because he threw 14 more attempts. He was 9.7 per attempt against Austin Peay, 10.6 against Jacksonville State, and then 14.2 against Georgia Tech. Hit several. I mean, and that's the thing, is they came out of the gate throwing deep. I think it was he missed a ball to Ja'Cory Brooks got broken up, and then I think it was Brooks that caught the next one. They took another deep shot, and I thought it was Brooks that caught it. And then of course you had the big crossing route. So it is it's another one of those really weird situations too, Trevor, because actually I believe Tyler Shuck is a 7th-year senior.
Yeah.
But he's had a lot of injuries. He's had 2, like he got a medical last year because he got hurt in the 4th game. Then obviously you have the COVID year. You got a medical for playing in 2021. But this is a kid that if you go back and look at some of the production he's had, I mean, he was a starting quarterback at Oregon in 2020 that, I mean, you look at during the COVID year, his first 4 games, he threw for 227, 312, 334, 285. This is a kid that's put up some numbers in his career. Obviously started at Oregon, went to Texas Tech, threw for 399 yards a week before getting hurt against Texas. And when he got hurt against Texas, he was 9 of 11 for 68 yards and got hurt and was out for the year. The game before that, he threw for 399 yards. He comes up back the next year, gets hurt in the opener, doesn't play again for a while, comes back late in the year, throws for 436 yards in a win over Oklahoma, and then throws for 242 yards and a touchdown and runs for 111 yards in a bowl win over Ole Miss. This is in 2022. And then last year he throws for 338 against Oregon. Or Wyoming, throws for 282 against Oregon, did throw 3 picks. But if you go back and watch that game, he was the reason they almost beat Oregon last year. And then, of course, gets hurt again. And now he comes out this year and he's playing the way he is. So this is a kid with a lot of talent. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. But now he's healthy and very experienced, Trevor. Very experienced. We talked last week about, we talked about Brett Gabbert and the production he's had. Well, this is a kid that has some production as well in his career, as we talked about. This is a kid that in his career has over 5,000 career passing yards, has 44 career passing touchdowns, has also rushed for over 700 yards in his career, and adds 10 more touchdowns. So this is a kid that's played. What is that? It's over 6,000 career yards of offense. So this is a kid that's played a lot of football, and Notre Dame's gonna have to be prepared. To your point, look, if Jeff Brom has a quarterback, his team is scary. Mm-hmm. I don't care what they have everywhere else. If Jeff Brom has a quarterback, his team can score on you. You know what I mean? Like, his team can score on you.
100%. I mean, he's a guy that if you give him the time, he can sit back there and pick you apart. Georgia Tech learned that. And now they have the athletes at wide receiver to boot who are good after the catch. So, I know we're going to dive into this throughout the week, but, Notre Dame's secondary hasn't really been tested yet. And, the pass rush is starting to come alive. So hopefully all those things start gelling at the right moments for Notre Dame's defense. But that's and
we'll dive more into that stuff tomorrow and Thursday for sure. Because there are some very important matchups. Trevor, you're going to write about it at irishbreakdown.com, and then we'll also talk about it in some upcoming shows. But, just a little bit more about this Louisville football team. As Trevor mentioned, they are 3-0 so far this season. If you look at their first 2 games were not even remotely competitive. They beat Austin Peay in the opener. I think Austin Peay is 1-3 to start the season, I believe. They beat them 62-0. They beat Jacksonville State 49-14 in a game that I did not feel was that close. Now, Jacksonville State is struggling. They're 1-3 so far this season. They got blown out by Coastal Carolina, also lost a road game at Eastern Michigan. Actually, Vince's son was at that game on a visit. That game between, I think it was the Jacksonville State game that he was at. And then obviously this past weekend they beat Georgia Tech. This was their first true test, and I think they answered that test pretty well in this past weekend's game. So you want to talk about what their team looks like? Let's bring up some numbers so you guys can get a sense of where they are. Now, again, these are through 3 games against an FCS opponent and then obviously a not very good Power 5 opponent. And you look at their production so far right there, Trevor. 47.3 points per game for, 11 points against. They're averaging 502 yards of offense, only giving up 268.7. Now, that is the one stat to me that is most skewed towards the schedule. And I'm curious your thoughts on this, Trevor. When I look at the Louisville offense, and they're moving the ball pretty well on everybody. They only had 326 yards against Georgia Tech, but part of that was because they did have 2 non-offensive touchdowns. They averaged 7.1 yards per play. So their total yardage is a little bit skewed by the fact that they didn't have as many opportunities, but their yards, they were still 7.1 yards per play, which is their quote unquote worst output of the season. That was against a Power 5 team. Defensively, they held Austin Peay to 106 yards. They gave up 290 to Jacksonville State. Georgia Tech went for 410 against them and 5.9 per play. So I thought that was the defensive statistics, especially points, is the one thing that's a little bit skewed from the numbers. But rushing wise, you see it. They're a pretty good rushing team, 190 yards per game. They're very good at stopping the run. They rank 9th in yards per rush, 11th in yards allowed per rush. They rank 18th in passing offense, 5th in yards per attempt, 19th in yards per completion, 8th in rating. Have only given up 2 sacks all season. And they are a okay, solid third down team, but a really good third down defense so far this season. And then, of course, they have yet to turn the ball over, which is a good sign for them. So statistically, obviously, Trevor, this is a pretty good looking football team. And even if you say, okay, yeah, two of those opponents weren't very good, their offense still looked pretty flipping good, even against the Georgia Tech team that's a pretty quality team so far this year.
I agree. I think the stat that sticks out the most to me is yards per rush, sitting at 2.5. I know one thing that kind of skews that a little bit is I'm pretty sure Austin P rushed the ball 34 times and got 34 rushing yards. So I think that is one that can be a little bit skewed in there, but that's still to the point. I think Georgia Tech still only averaged like 2.9 yards a carry, 2.7 yards.
2.7. So, yeah.
Yeah. So they are still a very, very good rush defense, and the most successful runner that Georgia Tech had and the most successful runner that Jacksonville State had was their quarterback, which is going to be an interesting matchup to talk about throughout the rest of the week. But Louisville's offense is very, very high powered, and they are able to move the ball up and down the field. So yeah, I mean, this is a very well coached football team that has a lot of skill behind it. 0 turnovers, I think, is a huge factor in that as well. So Notre Dame's going to have their hands full.
Yes, and I actually don't think Louisville's playing as well as they're capable of on defense, and their defense has still been pretty good. Their pass defense has been a problem for them so far this year, and we'll dive more into that tomorrow. But their run defense has been pretty stout. To your point, Trevor, is like Georgia Tech's a team that runs the football pretty good. I mean, they were come out in the game and coming into the game they had rushed for 190 against Florida State, 225 against Georgia State, 190 against VMI. Syracuse did a good job of shutting them down, held them to 112, but they were at 4.7 per carry in that game. They just didn't run it that much because they were behind. They were held to 98 yards against Louisville. They ran it 37 times. And so 2.7. And then you can look at it. Louisville had no sacks against Georgia Tech. So that was basically just them kind of shutting them down. Now, one thing that and we'll dive into this even more tomorrow, but one thing that is interesting, and Jeff Brom talked about this in his press conference, is one aspect about their season so far is the one area that they've struggled to stop the run is the quarterback. So Jamal Haynes, the running back from Georgia Tech that we all are familiar with, he had 25 yards on 12 carries. 17 of those yards came on one attempt. And then their next running back, Traylon Maddox, had 14 yards on 8 carries. Zach Pyron had 1 yard on 2 carries. Malik Rutherford had 1 for 1. So their top 2 running backs had 39 rushing yards on 20 carries. Their quarterback had 58 yards on 14 carries and had a nice big run early for a touchdown. 23-yard touchdown. He had another 20-plus yard run. And then Jacksonville State's quarterback, who's a dual threat guy, rushed for over 100 yards against Louisville. So they have had success. They have had success stopping running backs running the football. They have not had as much success stopping mobile quarterbacks from running the football. Now, I know that they shut down Riley Leonard last year, but that was a hobbled playing on one foot version of Riley Leonard last season. It was not. It was the post Notre Dame injury, first game back, couldn't run version of that. And so we'll see if that can continue. But they didn't get beat like this quite like this last year. So we're almost see how they adjust to playing mobile quarterbacks, because they do have a lot of new faces on their defense, and I wonder if that maybe is factoring into it as well.
Sure. I think a couple of things that's going to be fun just about this matchup in general between Notre Dame and Louisville is the stats almost mirror each other in the most opposite way possible. And I think that's crazy. Like, for example, Louisville's averaging 47.3 points per game. Notre Dame's allowing 9.8. And I think those matchups are going to be a lot of fun, right? Louisville's Louisville's defense is only allowing 2.5 yards per rush. In the last 2 games, Notre Dame rushed for 8.4 yards per carry, and then I think 7.5 or 7.4 against Miami of Ohio. So it's almost like some of the strengths that pop out, the eye-popping strengths of these stat sheets, it's almost completely opposite for the opposing team. Which
is a lot of good on good. It's a lot of good on good. I mean, we talk about how good Georgia Tech's Louisville's rush defense is. Well, Notre Dame's been a pretty darn good rushing team. I mean, if you think about it, Trevor, and you think about Notre Dame's performances on the ground, you could make a very strong case that their running game from a blocking standpoint has been better against the Power 5 teams that they've played this year than it was against the non-Power 5 teams. Because like right now, here's a weird stat to your point. Right now, Notre Dame ranks 18th in college football in rushing at 238.3 yards per game. They rank 5th in college football in yards per attempt at 6.7. Here's a crazy stat for you. If you go to fcfbstats.com, you can actually go and mark by conference, by ranked, by unranked. If you look at Notre Dame if you look at all games versus Power 5 opponents, Notre Dame is 3rd in college football at 280 yards per game in 2 games. And they've averaged 7.2 yards per carry, which is 3rd. So Notre Dame has actually been much better against their Power 5 opponents than they were against their 2 MAC opponents. Now, they did run for a bunch this year, but a lot of that was Riley Leonard running because they were trying to slow it down. And what's ironic is Georgia Tech and Texas A&M is number 1 in rush defense against Power 5 opponents, but they only played 1 game against a Power 5 opponent, and Notre Dame doesn't count because they're not considered a Power 5. So they ran for 310 yards against Florida. And the next closest team that's played, so A&M's ahead of them, UCF is ahead of them, and then right after them is Mississippi, Purdue, and Oregon. And those are the teams after them. But all of those teams, all 5 of those teams that I just mentioned have played 1 game against a Power 5 opponent. Notre Dame has played 2. The next closest team to them in that's played 2 is Oregon State, who's all the way down at 230. Iowa, who's all the way down to 238 per game. And so that's a very, very interesting statistic to look at. So it goes to your point of there's a lot of good on good in this game. A lot of good on good in this game. And, Notre Dame, ironically, Notre Dame has not padded their stats against the worst teams on their schedule so far. They've padded their stats against the better teams that they've played because they haven't scored a whole lot against the 2 teams that they've gone against, which still just kind of pisses me off. It's like I got to laugh or I'm going to cry.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You and me both, brother.
And the reason Notre Dame's not considered Power 5 is because they're not in one of the Power 5. And I'm not saying this flippantly, but they're not in one of the Power 5 conferences. They're considered an independent. And so teams don't like they're a Power 5 for all intents and purposes, but they're not a Group of 5 either because like they can't get the Group of 5 automatic bid. They have it's about conference affiliation. And so no, UMass and UConn also are not Power 5 teams because they're not in Power 5 conferences. So and now it's Power 4, but this statistic says so. It's if you're not in the ACC, if you're not in the Big 10, if you're not in the Big 12 or the SEC, you're not a Power 5 team. And so Notre Dame, for statistical purposes, is not considered a Power 5 team. Which I only say that because it's funny that A&M's there because they didn't run the ball poorly against Notre Dame, but like Purdue is a top 10 team in rushing offense against Power 5 teams because they ran for 263 against Oregon State. If Notre Dame was factored into that number goes way down because they only rushed for 38 yards against Notre Dame, which is, again, what's so frustrating about last week's performance because Purdue ran for 248 and 8 yards a carry against Indiana State. They went on the road against Oregon State, rushed for 263 and 8.8 yards per carry. But against Notre Dame, they ran for 38 yards and 1.5 yards per carry. And Notre Dame's going to need to bring that performance because this Louisville team can run the football. They have 3 running backs that are averaging over 10 yards a carry. Now, that's one of those ones that's aided by who they played because those running backs averaged 2.3, 2.0, and 2.3 and 2.0 against Georgia Tech. But they didn't carry the ball a lot, and they were like 12 to 13, 14 yards per carry against the 2 previous opponents. But there's a lot of good on good in this instance, Trevor. A lot of good on good. And there's some areas that we'll break down more tomorrow where it's like, they're pretty good in this area. Notre Dame hasn't been. Third down defense is pretty good. Notre Dame hasn't been great on third down. They've gotten better the last 2 games. So it's a very interesting statistical matchup that we'll do our stacking up feature tomorrow. I'm going to try to convince Trevor to come on with me tomorrow. We'll see. Maybe pressure him live on air to see if I can get him to commit to it. But we'll dive more into that breakdown of the Notre Dame rush offense against the Louisville rush defense and that type of thing as we break that down, which is going to be very fascinating. And we will look at the 2024 stats for that. But this is a good football team. And again, this is not a team that came out of nowhere, Trevor. This is a team that won 10 games last year and played for the ACC championship.
Yep.
Like this is a good football team. It's a really good football team. There's no doubt about it.
A lot of talent. They know how to push the ball down the field, man.
That's right. So, Trevor, let's dive into Louisville a little bit and talk about why we think this Louisville football team is a good football team and what we think makes them an effective football team. And we'll start with offense. And really, we'll get into the talent here in a second. But when you really start with why I really like this Louisville football team, I will be honest. I have a bias when it comes to their head football coach. I do. I'm not afraid to admit that. I think Jeff Brom is one of the smartest football coaches in the business. And I've thought that when I first started watching his offenses at Louisville. I mean, at Western Kentucky, excuse me. And so that's always going to affect. They're always a team to me that I'm going to be concerned about because Jeff Brom's there. And when they hired him, I kind of felt the same thing. Like, you're going to give Jeff Brom the kind of athlete is able to get. Like, seriously, this is going to be scary for the rest of college football. But it really does start there. Jeff Brom has proven to be, you could say some things about, okay, is he a great head coach? His defenses weren't great at Purdue and his O-lines, and I get all that. His defense has been pretty darn good first 2 years at Louisville. And that's a more fair conversation to have. What I'm referring to more so is, and I do think he's a heck of a head coach. I'm saying you can have an open conversation about how good of a head coach he is when you look at his record and some different things like that. But what can't be debated is whether or not he's one of the best offensive minds in the game. Send me in the chat. Andrew Gilmore's been on fire today with great quotes. He said Jeff Brom is like a moral Bobby Petrino. And I would agree with that. He's Bobby Petrino with a conscience. But I actually think Jeff Brom's an even better coach than Bobby Petrino, because I don't think Jeff Brom until now has ever had the kind of athletes that Bobby Petrino had for a long time at Auburn and Arkansas and places like that. This is the first time he's actually had the kind of athletes. He had a guy here, a guy there. He had Rondell Moore at Purdue and David Bell at Purdue. But he's never had this kind of talent he's had at quarterback, running back, wide receiver all together that he has now. And you see what he's doing with it. But just offensive mind, as we dive into the offense, Trevor, this is one of the best offensive minds in the business. And that's what Al Golden's going to be matched up against. And his brother is his offensive coordinator, who's also a pretty smart ascending football coach.
Jeff Brom has always historically done a really good job of utilizing the tools that he does have on offense, which I think is a really good trait of a coach. There's kind of that two-track mind of you either, recruit guys and you mold them into what you need, or you kind of do the opposite and you kind of mold your scheme to the guys that you currently have on your roster. And I think Jeff Brom does a really good job of doing both, which I think makes him such a dangerous offensive mind in college football, which I love. So, yeah, I mean, Louisville, they do a lot of really good things really well. They use a lot of different personnel groupings, man. It's awesome. All right, let's do it. I'm in for tomorrow.
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right.
Come on. Let's do it.
The thing, Trevor, you make a great point about that, because like I had a friend of mine, we were having some debates about, he had asked me, apparently him and some friends were having a discussion of, like, let's just say for whatever reason, Marcus Freeman decided not to take the head coaching job. Would I have been happy if Jeff Brom was head coach? And I was like, yeah, I'd be ecstatic about that. And he's like, but don't you believe in being able to run the football? I said, yeah, I do believe in being able to run. He goes, well, he didn't run the ball at Purdue. I said, because he didn't have the ability to run the football at Purdue. He inherited terrible lines, and they didn't have very talented backs. And so, like, to your point, now his scheme is his scheme, pass game wise. But to your point, though, he tailors it to fit what he does. And I tried to make this point to my buddy. I was like, but go look at what he did at Western Kentucky. They had very balanced offenses at Western Kentucky when he was there. And now they weren't like light the world on fire running for 300 yards a game, but Jeff Brom had plenty of seasons at Western Kentucky where they were pretty good at running the football. And, last year at Western Kentucky, he had a running back that rushed for 1,600 yards and 27 touchdowns, went for 186.4 yards per game. right? Because why? Because that's what he had the talent to do. Now, they still threw the ball a ton. They had Mike White at quarterback. They threw for over 4,000 yards, but they were a dynamic team that also believed in running the football. You go to Purdue, don't have great running backs. You don't have – your offensive line is a hot mess. And so you say, okay, we got to throw the football around a lot more. And that's what we're talking about, tailoring to your talent. It's not like, okay, let's run an air raid now because of our – no, it's we're going to fit what we do around and tailor it to what we have. And I'm not going to force feed, we've got to run the football just because it makes me feel better and it sounds like a great thing if we don't have the ability to run the football. But now you see him at Louisville. He's got better players. And guess what? He can run the football. Because do you know how many passing yards Louisville had against Notre Dame last year? Wasn't a lot. They struggled to throw the football on Notre Dame last year. Matter of fact, I think it was like 145 yards. Let me go look up this. It was something low, like 150 yards, 104. I was right, 145 yards, and only averaged 6.0 yards per attempt because they did throw 24 passes. So they, completed 70.8% of their throws. Yeah, because they were all dinks and dunks because they couldn't get the ball down the field. 145 yards passing, but you know why they won that game? Because they can run the ball on Notre Dame. They rushed for 185 yards against Notre Dame. And the first series was about finding ways to get the running game going. That's what that whole first series was about. And it had Notre Dame on their heels for a little bit. And so he's been willing to do that when he has the horses. Let's talk specifically about what makes this scheme difficult. And a big one is, Trevor, they do a lot of stuff that makes you chase in the pass game. A lot post-snap switches, levels. They run a million crossers, and you got to get it wrong once. And we saw that against Georgia Tech. They got it wrong once. Guy missed a tackle. Chris Bell takes it into guy was there, but why did it work, Trevor? Because that stuff gets your guys in space. You may tackle it 4 times for 4-yard gains, but the one time you miss, you turn a guy loose, it's gone. And that's something that I want to see more of from them. They hardly run any crossers at Notre Dame in any kind of levels. He does a lot of that stuff. They do a lot of stuff off play action that's really effective at Louisville. A lot of post-snap switch stuff. They do a million different formations. Like, you've got to be prepared for so much formationally. Now, they're going to run a lot of the same concepts out of all those different looks, but they hit different based on how they're lining up. And those are things like they'll run corner routes like 5 different ways based on where the receiver's lined up, whether it's a true post corner because he's more inside, burst corner, whether it's a deep angle corner, which is I think what Ja'Cory Brooks ran early in the game. They do so much stuff that makes you chase, but they also run a lot of stuff that makes you turn. And that's what can really get you in trouble as a DB because of the way that they run routes. You've got to be doing a lot of this. DBs want to do this once on a play. That's it. And then they want to run with you. And so like there's a lot that teams that want to be better throwing the football can learn by watching this Louisville pass offense, just schematically. And they put you in serious binds. And he's really good at finding different ways to get his best players in favorable matchups, whether it's tight ends, running backs, receivers, whatever. He's going to find what your weakness is and how he can best exploit it. Sometimes it may be a slot. Sometimes it may be a Z. Sometimes it may be a tight end. And, and he's got guys that can catch the ball at all those positions on this offense.
Yeah. And I think that's what there was a play against Georgia Tech that they ran, and it was their second string tight end that they brought back, and he was lined up at tight end, but he was off the line of scrimmage, and he faked pass pro for maybe 2 seconds. And it was almost like a broken play. Rolls out, quarterback rolls out to the right and finds the tight end late on a drag route. Late drag route. It was almost like a delayed route. Catches it, goes for I literally think it was 2nd and 24. And I think it went for a first down.
Was that the one they called back because of the penalty?
Yeah, that they called it back because of an illegal man downfield.
It was a screen. That's what made it was a screen. It made it 2nd and 24 after the penalty. Mm-hmm. It was no, you're right. It was 2nd and long, and he delayed and they ran a screen, but he went just a little bit too far down past the line and caught it past the line. But if he executes that, the tight end executes it properly, that's a great play call. which makes it even like Trevor, to your point, it like if you watch it, you look like it's just like a check down that they turned loose, right? And that's so like if you guys go watch this play, I think it was their second or third drive, Trevor, to your second drive. But the tight end is playing left. He kind of looks like he blocks, and then he just kind of takes off underneath. And it almost looks like he's like, because a lot of tight ends do that. They'll check pass pro, nobody comes. It's a check release, you just run across her. But it was a screen. That's why that guy was downfield. If the tight end, Notre Dame got called for that against A&M because Cooper Flanagan drifted downfield on a tight end screen. It was a tight end screen, and you're just like, of all the weapons you have, your number 2 tight end, who's a talented player, by the way, is the guy you turn to on that play. And it worked. If he executes it properly, it was a great play call. And like they came out and they were running, remember against Notre Dame last year? And again, they had a little extra time to prepare, but they were running like that fake shovel stuff against Notre Dame on the first drive. Because they're going to do stuff to you on drive 1 that you haven't seen. Be prepared for it. Now, they don't do that for 60 minutes, but early in the game, first couple series, you're going to get at least 2 or 3 things you have not seen on film from them this year. 100%. And that was a great play call, Trevor, by the way. Because again, like you say, when you watch it, it didn't look like he was necessarily part of what they were doing. But that's why they did what they did, is to set that particular play up. And his offense also is designed to spread the ball around.
Yeah, I mean, Louisville's offense as a whole does a lot of things to get your eyes going a lot of different directions post-snap, which is going to be a little bit different than what Notre Dame has seen so far this year. They've had a lot of trouble with pre-snap motion, and Louisville doesn't do a whole lot of that. The biggest thing
like
that
the basic stuff. It's like just one receiver motion and a back out. But you better believe that Jeff Brom's is going to add something to that this week 100%. Because of how much Notre Dame has struggled with it.
Yep. Well, and what they would do sometimes throughout the game against Georgia Tech is they would motion and change the formation completely. Sometimes that's something that they did a lot pre-snap. So Tyler Shuck would line up in the gun, and they would have, running back beside him and then 2 tight ends out to the left, and they would shift. Tyler Shuck goes under center. One of the tight ends lines up as a fullback, and then they have a tight end over. So definitely interesting to see what they're going to do pre-snap against Notre Dame. And to your point, Jeff Brom is a genius. So there is going to be a little bit of a wrinkle of what they do.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's not hyperbole in my opinion. This isn't let's hype up the coach that Notre Dame's getting ready to play. I believe that. I think this guy's like one of the I've been breaking his film down since he was at Western Kentucky. I mean, like,
oh yeah,
this dude is wicked smart. Like if you're someone who likes offensive coaching and you're someone who likes creative pass concepts and not gimmicky, creative. There's a difference. Gimmicky is like you put your 2 offensive linemen out in the hashes and you're doing, you know what I mean? Like, no, this is creative, not gimmicky. And there's a big difference, and it's fun to watch, dude.
Oh yeah. I mean, you don't go out and beat the 3rd ranked team in Ohio State by 29 points because you get lucky, right? Like Jeff Brom is a genius when it comes to, like, for all the people that hear those terms tossed out about like they need to scheme their guys open more, go watch a Jeff Brom football game, man. Like he does that. He knows the different ways to get the ball into his playmakers' hands. There's a reason why Rondell Moore absolutely tore Ohio State's defense to shreds that year. And it wasn't because he was breaking 19 tackles on every single play. It's because he was schemed open. He was put in favorable matchups. That's what Jeff Brom is able to do.
But it wasn't. Here's the other thing too: is what did they do to Ohio State that game that had Ohio State a little bit off balance early? Is he went away from what they kind of normally did, and how did he do that? They ran the ball. I mean, people forget DJ Knox had 100 yards rushing that game, because they were doing things to get them off balance in that game. And to your point, Rondell Moore was making dudes miss 15, 20 yards down the field. But he was also, but here's the thing about some of him making people miss. When he was making people miss, that's part of the game plan. It's get your guy in space against them. This is exactly what we've been talking about with Notre Dame's running backs. Design ways, blocking ways to get them in space, because if they get them in space, you're going to have a hard time bringing them down. And A&M had a hard time doing that. Purdue had a hard time doing that. Every team that they play, I mean, Jeremiah Love, the run he had against Northern Illinois, the problem that people had was like they probably should have carried the ball more in that game, especially with Riley Leonard not being able to run that game because of his shoulder. Yep. And that's the thing is like, yeah, okay, well, yeah, Rondo Moore. But why was Rondo Moore in space so many times getting the football in ways where they weren't on him? They had to try to close on him and tackle. You don't think Ohio State's game plan was like, hey, we may want to not let Rondo Moore go off? It wasn't like they had no clue who that guy was until that, man, we never heard of Rondo Moore. He just kind of – it's not like Timmy Smith in the Super Bowl against the Broncos. You know what I'm saying? Like where like he wasn't even part of their whole team until – Super Bowl was kind of his breakout party. No, everybody in the country knew who Rondo Moore was even before that game. I mean, he had already had – look, he was a freshman on that team. He already had 4 100-yard games before that against Northwestern, Missouri, BC, and Illinois, and he had 8 for 85 against Nebraska. Ohio State knew very well who Rondo Moore was coming into that game. And there was still nothing they could do about it because Jeff Brom coached circles around their defensive staff, and that's always the fear with him. Now, I don't know that he's going to necessarily be able to do that to the degree he did that night against this defensive coaching staff, but he can do enough to beat you because we just saw him do it a year ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. And he's got weapons. You look at the Louisville roster just overall, I do think Tyler Shuck is a more talented quarterback than Jack Plummer. Yep. He's a better athlete. I think he's got a better arm, better release, better ball placement when he's healthy. I think their running back room is not as good as last year, but it's still good. Mm-hmm. I don't think their offensive line is as good as it was last year, especially their tackles. I've actually been kind of disappointed with the play of their line, especially against Georgia Tech. But their skill talent is even better than it was overall last year. Like receiver, tight end. Like they had good receivers last year. Jamari Thrash was a good player, but this receiving core is even better, and they haven't even gotten Colin Lacey back yet. Like, imagine what this offense is going to look like when Colin Lacey comes back healthy. Now, they did lose Jadon Thompson to a season-ending injury. He got hurt against Georgia Tech. But he was their number 3 receiver, not their number 1 or number 2. Like, so far, Brooks and Bell have been their top receiver so far. But when you get Colin Lacey back, good Lord. Yeah. Like, that's not even – and their running backs this year are kind of like complementary pieces where last year they had like legit, like a legit 1-2 punch last year at running back with Jordan and I'm forgetting the Isaac Garendo, right, who both got drafted last year. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're as good there. I don't think they're as good on the offensive line. So they're having to scheme a little bit more for run game success this year. But they have a more mobile quarterback than they had last year. But Trevor, I don't know if you agree with this, but I just think their overall pass catching skill and pass game skill is just better than it was a year ago, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely elevated, and I touch on it a little bit in the article that we're putting out tomorrow. But it's what they are now lacking in the run game that they are missing from the 2023 season. They're making up for in their pass catchers. Because they are like that part of the offense has now been elevated. Ja'Cory Brooks is a freak athlete. Like one thing that I don't think it's talked about enough is his ability to make people miss in space as a 6'3", 195-pound wide receiver. Like he's not just a big bodied guy that they throw fades up to. He is a really good athlete. Same thing when they get Colin Lacey back. Is he for sure out on Saturday?
No,
is he questionable?
They are Brom said so. When he originally got hurt, the time frame, the beginning of the 6 to 8 weeks was this week. Was the beginning of when the window for his return would be. Brom said yesterday that they're going to try to get him going, and it'll be a game time decision. If he's healthy enough to play, he's going to play.
Sure.
And but you also have to be like, okay, if he's not, do you really want to? I mean, you're in a good enough position to where you can still go win a football game with what you have.
Sure.
But they're going to try to ramp him up. Part of me, you prepare like he's going to play. Yeah. If I'm Notre Dame, you prepare because if you have a game plan to shut him down also, then you can handle whoever else is going to replace him.
Yeah.
But I would prepare like he's going to play is what I would do if I was Notre Dame. But yeah, he's questionable for the week so far as of right now.
Okay. But yeah, man, I mean, their running back room, it's very much a stable right now. And I don't mean like it. I think they mentioned it in the Georgia Tech game that they will just feed the hot hand. They don't have a guy that's like, hey, this is our guy. and then we'll bring this guy in on a down and distance. I think they played 4 different running backs by the time there's 13 minutes left in the second quarter. So they do have, like, their first 2 guys they're not crazy athletes. I do know they have a true freshman. His name is escaping me right now.
Yes,
but
you're talking about Isaac Brown or Kewan Brown. I think Isaac Brown, the kid from Florida, number 25.
Yeah. That kid
electric.
is fast. He is shifty, man. So he is kind of their change of pace back to bring it in. But the first 2 guys I have on the depth chart, one of them transferred in. Not crazy athletes, but still effective. And Jeff Brom will want to establish the run game, especially after what Notre Dame did against Miami of Ohio. So.
Yeah, and it's also interesting too, because like Don Chaney's listed as a starter, but he actually has fewer carries. He's actually, fourth on the team in carries. So Kewan Brown has their most carries. He's got 19. And then Maurice Turner, who's only played 2 games, and Isaac Brown, who's the kid you were talking about, have 16 carries. Now, Maurice Turner did not play against Georgia Tech. And then you have, like I said, Kewan Brown has 19 carries. He's their extra leader in carries, but he's only had 9. Like, here's to back. This is why I was going to go at this point. Is they have 5 guys on the roster, 5 running backs with at least 13 carries so far this season. And if you look at it, the most that Isaac Brown had was 8. The most that Duke Watson has had is 6. The most that Kewan Brown has had is 9. The most that Maurice Turner had was 12 against Jacksonville State. And then the most that Don Chaney had was 10 against Georgia Tech. So of all those running backs, only 2 of them in a game have gone over 10 yards or 10 carries in a game, or gotten 10 carries in a game, because they spread it. Like you said, they're going to spread it around. And if somebody's hot, then they're going to do that. Now, against Notre Dame, I would expect him to do some things with the 2 faster backs to try to create big play opportunities, because I think he knows in this game you're going to have to create some big plays. We saw it last year. He took that first drive right up down the field, and then after that, it was like, if you can't get a big play, you're not scoring on Notre Dame. And the next 2 touchdown drives when the game was in doubt, both were fueled by big plays in the run game. And so he knows he's going to have to create some. So you're going to see something with a back on a screen, a back on an angle route, a back on a wheel, something with trying to get the tight ends loose, some kind of throwback, they're going to do something to try to generate big plays. And I think the running backs and the tight ends are the position where, if I'm looking at this team and knowing Jeff Brom like I do, those are the 2 positions that I would be most concerned about trying to catch you with something in this game. And again, what else does that do? That gets those guys in matchups against your most inexperienced part of your football team, which is your linebackers. And that's the thing, is Jeff Brom is not only going to say, hey, here's what we do. He's going to look for your weak spot and look to exploit it in a lot of different ways. And as Northern Illinois proved, if you can do things to get the Notre Dame linebackers thinking and guessing, you can create potential missed opportunities or mistakes by them. And I think that's what we're going to see. He's probably one of the best in the business, in my opinion, about finding ways to hurt you in the areas where you're least effective. And he can find your soft spot and say, okay, that's how I'm going to make you pay for that. So, yeah, somebody said we got a crush on Jeff Brom. I'm like, football-wise, yeah, I do. I mean, I've never hidden that fact, ever. You know what I mean? So I will own that. I will absolutely own that. But it also, if you are able to shut this offense down, it speaks volumes about how good you are on defense. Last year, I think they were a little bit easier to shut down just because I thought their quarterback was limited. And although they had good receivers, they weren't scary receivers. Jamari Thrash could hit some big play, but they were about scheme last year, Trevor. Like, that's how I felt about Louisville last year. They were just good because they were coached well. This year, I think they have a chance to be good because they're coached well, and they're a lot more athletic, in my opinion. And that's what makes them dangerous. This year's version of this football team would have been a much more difficult matchup than for Florida State last year than what they faced in the ACC title game. It was all about, man, that's a great job by Brom. I said this a lot. You give him the weapons that this team that he's playing has, and it's a different conversation. And still won 10 games last season. So, heck of a football coach. We'll dive more into the specific matchups here like in tomorrow's show and then Thursday, but we're going to get into defense next. Let's let's do us a favor, folks, before we do slide over the defense. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star, right? 5-star review if you on your favorite platform, podcast platform. And of course, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Trevor, let's talk about the Louisville defense, because this is statistically, it looks really good. But this is the side of the ball that I don't think has been playing as well. And you're going against a Notre Dame offense that has not been playing all that well in most games. Doing enough to win in certain games, but not, you did enough to beat A&M on offense, but you didn't drive the victory. That was driven by the defense. You did enough to beat Miami of Ohio by 25, but you didn't drive the defense. And then, of course, when you talk about the other game, that's just, it's bad. But anyway, they did play great against Purdue. Okay, but that's 1 out of 4. That's the anomaly so far. Georgia Tech exposed some potential weak spots in the Louisville defense. I don't know if Notre Dame's capable of taking advantage of them. We'll find out. But this is a defense that I think is going to continue to get better, though. That's the concern, because there are a lot of new faces. They've had some guys banged up. There's a lot of new transfers up front, some new transfers in the secondary. The more they're in the system, because it's not a super easy system, I think the better their defense is going to be. And you need to make sure that this isn't the game that happens, because this is only game 4 for them, not game 5 like it is for Notre Dame. And so you hope that breakout comes like, okay, this Louisville defense is going to figure it out, Trevor. They're going to figure it out. They're going to get rolling, and they're going to be pretty good. You just hope that's against like SMU or Virginia or Miami, somebody like that, and not Notre Dame. Because I do think that what we've seen so far on film, there's some areas that you can exploit them a little bit. But they're an aggressive defense, pretty good D-line. They're a team that can kind of go 4-3 or 4-2-5. They've done a little bit of both. They've got a hybrid linebacker in Ben Perry that is a linebacker, but he kind of almost plays more like, I think sometimes more like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah than he does, a true linebacker, inside linebacker. They can go nickel easily. And what's interesting is one of my favorite players from their team last year is not even starting for them right now. In Devin Neal, he got beat out. I mean, he's not. The other two kids are playing more. McDonald's playing more. Quincy Riley's one of the best cornerbacks Notre Dame's going to face this year. He's a little banged up. He's got an ankle injury. He's questionable for this weekend as well. I'd be shocked if he doesn't play. How good is he going to be? I don't know. But when he's healthy, he's not only the best cornerback that Notre Dame's going to face, in my opinion. He's one of the best. He's one of the 10 best cornerbacks in college football when he's healthy, in my opinion. And then I know there's a linebacker that you like as well in TJ Quinn. He was on my all-opponent team. And, of course, he hasn't been great so far this year. But Aston Gillott's another kid that just wrecked Notre Dame last year. That you just have to be careful that this isn't his breakout performance, or this is the thing you worry about with Notre Dame. It's the money game for a lot of these kids, right? Like, especially now with NIL, this is where you make that. But this is the game you want to put on film for let the NFL people know what you're all about. And so it's a group that has talent, but it's a group that's still coming together, in my opinion, because there's a lot of guys still learning the defense. What are your thoughts on what they do defensively, Trevor?
Yeah, I agree. What they're lacking in right now in consistency, they're making up for with athleticism. They're a very long defense, and that's something that kind of jumps off the page when you look at the roster and when you look at how they play on the field. I mean, going through and looking at their depth chart right now, they don't have a single defensive back. Actually, their shortest defensive back is Quincy Riley, and he's one of the best DBs in the country. They're very long. They're a very athletic defense.
I think note the shortest guy is 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
Quincy Riley's listed, and I don't know if he's quite 6 feet tall, but like he's around 6 feet tall. He's listed 6 feet. That's their quote unquote short guy.
Yeah.
To Trevor's point.
Yep. I mean, to your point, I really liked Devin Neal last year too, and he does rotate in. He was a starter last year, and his spot got I don't want to say taken, but Tamari McDonald is seeing more.
It's been reduced. How about that?
Yeah.
It's been reduced. He's still playing because, to your point, you are correct. They do rotate their safeties a lot, but I think he's I'm looking at the numbers, and I'm actually curious. And I guess we shouldn't necessarily say that his spot's been taken. Perhaps he had an injury in the offseason that he's coming back from, so I should be careful there. But he's played 89 snaps in 3 games. He played 19 against Georgia Tech. He hasn't played more than 36 snaps in a game. So maybe some of you, if there's any Louisville fans in the chat, maybe you can clear this up. Was Devin Neal just beat out by McDonald, or is he kind of battling back from an injury? I'm like, because like if you could say, well, like, okay, if you don't follow Notre Dame, you may be like, hey, did Cooper Flanagan beat out Mitchell Evans? Because like first 3 games of the year, he's playing more than Mitchell Evans. Like he must have beat out Mitchell Evans. So I don't know that for a fact, but the other kid's playing more right now than Devin Neal is. To your point.
I am high on TJ Quinn. He was all over the field last year when Notre Dame was playing him. I mean, he had 10 total tackles that game. I think it was split up like four solo tackles, 6 assisted tackles. So I mean, they're a team that wraps up, or they are a team that flies to the ball really well. They gang tackle, and then Ashton Gillott is having somewhat of a subpar year so far this year, but last year against Notre Dame, he had 2.5 tackles for a loss, 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble. I mean, he was all over the place. And the thing that makes him so dangerous, which I know we're going to break down more tomorrow and throughout the rest of the week, but he plays on multiple spots on the defensive line, which just in the game alone last year against Notre Dame, he lined up across from Billy Schrouth. When he was at left guard, he lined up across from Blake Fisher. There were a few where he was outside against Joe Alt. So they do a lot of different things on the defensive side.
And then never know where he's going to be on third down. Like, no. To your point, like you don't know, he could be a nose on third down on one snap, and the next series he's coming off the edge, and then he's going to go off the edge and then twist, start at the nose and then twist. I mean, yes, you nailed that. They're going to do a lot of things, and that's where I think Alex English does a pretty good job. It's also why at times they can really get gashed. Because if you can get a read on what he's doing, you can gash them. But they do a lot. I mean, flying the safeties down. They do a lot of line games, a lot of hard slants, which can create a lot of tackles for loss. But if you block it correctly, you can also hit him on a cutback. And
we're talking a lot about best on best. I mean, I think this is on one hand, you have Jeff Brom, who's a genius offensive mind, versus Al Golden, who's a really good defensive mind. And now you also have Mike Denbrock, and there's a lot of fans out there that are kind of waiting for him to open it up and say, like, hey, like, where is this Mike Denbrock that we've been hearing all offseason about? Now is going to be a really good time because this Louisville defense does a lot of stunts up front, and they do a lot of different line games. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how Mike Denbrock starts to get Riley Leonard in a rhythm and how he's going to start creating running lanes for Jeremiah Love and for Jadarian Price, and honestly, and for Riley Leonard, because I know we touched on it a little bit, but Louisville is susceptible to giving up yards to the quarterback. I mean, Haynes King was the leading rusher for Georgia Tech last Saturday. So there's going to be a lot of different things, and I'm going to be interested to see how they do it. But the thing that stands out to me about Louisville's defense as a whole, they gang tackle very well. They fly to the ball. They are very athletic. They're a long defense, especially once you get up here to the second level. Tramel Logan is 6'4". Stanquan Clark is 6'3". His backup is 6'3". They have a safety that's 6'2", another safety that's 6'1". So they are very long, which makes throwing windows a little tighter. But they are a very aggressive defense, which does leave them susceptible to big plays. So going to be interesting to see how Notre Dame game plans around that.
Very, very much. Very, very much. So last year, Notre Dame could not get a read on Louisville because they just got dominated up front. And that is going to be, and we'll do a deeper dive into this tomorrow, that ultimately is going to be the thing that determines whether or not this offense is successful. That's really what it's going to come down to. You can talk about Riley Leonard and the receiver. It's going to come down to, can you win up front? And pass game wise, it's two different battles. Pass game wise is a whole different animal than run game wise, because run game wise, this offensive line's been pretty good so far this year. Pass game wise, it's a problem. They haven't been very good this year, especially on the left side. And that can completely, that's what Duke did to Notre Dame last year. Sam Hartman couldn't throw. Why couldn't he throw? Because half the time he dropped back, there's someone in his face. And that's a concern that I have coming into this game, is because Alex English is going to bring a lot at you. He's going to throw a lot at you. And you've got a very young offensive line. How prepared are they going? This is a game where Joe Rudolph's going to make his money or not. Is how prepared can you get your boys ready to play in this game? Physically and mentally. And that ultimately is going to be a big part of who wins this game, because they are going to talk. They're going to throw a lot at Notre Dame and in an attempt to – because, like, again, Alex English has been around a long time. He's been D coordinator at Michigan. He's been in the NFL. This is a sharp guy. He's going to say, okay, let me look at their offensive line. True freshman, redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore at right tackle, and 2 seniors that got beat out that are starting in the offensive line right now.
And one of them's playing out of position. Not out of position, but a different one than what they played.
Position. Right,
yeah.
Right. Now, I thought he played pretty well at that position last week. But it's still your number 2 guy. So we're going to throw stuff at them, because if we beat them, then we don't have to worry as much about stopping number 4 and number 24 and number 13. Because the way you stop them is to dominate those guys. And he's a smart guy. He's going to know that. And that's exactly what happened last year. I think they knew, like, we are not going to be able to stop Audric Estime and Mitchell Evans if it just becomes a skill-on-skill game. And Notre Dame has some receiver things that they can do. And we're going to dominate this game because we're going to dominate the linemen. And that's exactly what they did. And that's where you kind of hope that there's a little bit of sense of pride with the O-line. But then you look at it and you're like, only 2 of the guys that started that game last year are even playing in this game. You know, because you don't have Zeke Crow, you don't have Joe Walt, you don't have Blake Fisher, and Anthony Knapp wasn't on the team. I don't even know if Sam Pendleton traveled to this game. I know Emil traveled. I don't think he played. Billy Schrouth played in that game. He did. He's not playing right now. So, you know, that's kind of interesting thing. But defensively, they are going to throw a lot at you. They're going to try to disguise their coverages, get their quarterback to bait, you know, to kind of make a mistake with, you know, here's what I think I'm seeing. And post snap reads, you're going to try to create they try to create a lot of negatives with their line games and their defensive line. So that's another thing, Trevor, too, that this is a defense that's going to try to create a lot of mistakes. They ranked 24th in college football last year in tackles for loss. And they had 84 last season. So this is a team that likes to get after it. No question about it. And the thing I like, they were 30th in sacks. Or no, that's actually where they are this year. Where were they in sacks last year? They ranked 29th in sacks. So you had 34 sacks and 84 tackles for loss, which means they created 50 negatives in the run game last season. Notre Dame last season had 75 tackles for loss and 31 sacks, which means they created only 44. So that's kind of how I look at that is what are you generating in that regard? The year before, Notre Dame was a little bit better about that, but that's a big key too, is there's a lot of run game minuses that they're going to create because of how aggressive they are with their line games, and they've got defensive linemen that they let attack.
Yep.
And that's a big part of it. So again, this is a well-coached football team. This is a good football team. This is a football team that Notre Dame should beat, in my opinion. But this is a team that if you are going to beat them, you are going to have to earn the heck out of it, because they're not going to lay down and die. Like the only game that I thought were last year where Louisville just came out and you're like, who the heck is this team, was the Pitt game, in my opinion. And I mean, they lost to Kentucky by a touchdown. They battled Florida State, but Florida State just overwhelmed them in the trenches.
Yep. And
the bowl game I don't care about. But what was the Pitt game? When did that happen? So a week after they smacked Notre Dame. That was a classic letdown game. You know, we just earned this huge win over Notre Dame, and we're going to go play this Pitt team that sucks, and they just walked through it and got beat. But this is a team that, other than that, you got to earn a win over them, and Notre Dame is certainly going to have to do that because, like I said, it's a well-coached football team. Are they as well-coached defensively as they are on offense? No, they're not. They're not. But I would argue that their talent level might be just as good, and it's even better in the trenches. Like the only spot on offense that I look at and say there's not a lot of talent there is the O-line. I don't like that O-line. It's not as good as I thought it would be. Defensively, it's more like I don't like this particular DB or that particular linebacker as much. But as a whole, I actually like their top to bottom talent on defense. It's just a lot of new guys, I think, learning the system. You know, over half their D line is transfers. They got a couple transfers in the secondary. It's guys that are learning new stuff, and they're going to keep getting better and better and better. No doubt about it.
100%. I agree.
I keep saying Alex English. It's Ron English. Alex English was a basketball player. I don't know why I keep saying Alex English. It's Ron English.
Okay.
Yeah.
The name sounded familiar. I was like,
yeah, Alex English. Yeah. No, Ron English. Alex English is the former guard of I think he was the Nuggets. I think it's who he played for. But back in my day. But yes, Ron English is the name of the court.
Well, good deal. I mean, the chess match between Mike Denbrock and Ron English is going to be a lot of fun to watch on Saturday. I mean, for me, I just like watching ball, man. Like I like watching a good game, and we went about and talked about it earlier that there's going to be a lot of best on best, and I think that also starts working its way up the ladder once you start talking about the coordinators. Obviously, I know what I want the outcome to be for this game. But it's going to be awesome to see this little chess match that's going to go back and forth between Jeff Brom and Al Golden and Ron English and Mike Denbrock. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Trevor, I think when we kind of wrap up this segment, I think your point right there is great because you look at it from the standpoint of Marcus Freeman has a lot to prove as a head football coach when it comes to the head football coach part Monday to Friday and then on Saturday. The recruiting part, he nails. The being someone who represents the university with class and grace, he nails. He might even be better at that than he is at recruiting, and he's great at recruiting. Yeah. It's can you prepare your team at an elite level for moments like this? When you get in game, can you push the buttons that need to be pushed to help you win football games? And that's not been a strength of his so far. This is one of those moments on top of everything else we talked about, looking at it strictly for Marcus Freeman and this coaching staff. This is one of those ones where you're going to have to show your worth as a football staff in a preparation standpoint, because football games are won on Saturdays, but the foundation that's like people, football games are won and lost Monday to Friday. No, they're not. They're won and lost on Saturday. You don't play on unless your game is, you're a MAC team and you're playing on a Wednesday night, you know what I mean? But like,
sure,
they're won and lost on game day, but the foundation of the preparation goes into how you play on that game day and whether you win or lose. And if Marcus Freeman can get his team ready to play this game and they can go out there and go toe to toe from a coaching standpoint, like you were talking about, that sends another statement and makes another statement that I think takes maybe some of the heat that's on Marcus Freeman, fair or unfair, off of it. Because, like, look, guys, he went toe-to-toe with one of the best in the business, and they were the better coach team and the better prepared team as well as the more talented team. And if you don't, and you get out-coached again, even if you win, but you just like, yeah, Notre Dame won because they had better players. And if you give Jeff Brom, I don't want to hear this, man. If you gave Jeff Brom Notre Dame's roster, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to hear that. I mean, it's true. I would love to see Jeff Brom with Notre Dame's roster. But what I'm saying is you want to see Marcus Freeman say, yeah, but Marcus Freeman does a lot with Notre Dame's roster too. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I hope we're talking about coming out of that game. If we're talking about that, Notre Dame wins, not even a question. If we're talking about that was the better coached football team on Saturday, Notre Dame wins. Louisville can be the better coach team and still lose. Notre Dame can't because of where the rosters are. Now, that may not be true in 2 or 3 years after Jeff Brom's, and if they're able to kind of recruit their way. He's still in year 2, and he inherited a not great roster from Scott Satterfield, right?
Sure.
And he's making up ground quickly. But right now, Notre Dame in year 3 of Marcus Freeman has a better top-to-bottom roster than Louisville has in year 2 of Jeff Brom. So if you win the coaching battle, you will win the on-field battle if you're Notre Dame. It's not necessarily true at Louisville. They could out-coach Notre Dame and still lose a close game. Just depends on the degree in which Notre Dame is out-coached. So that would be something that I also would love to see come out of this game. And again, it would take some of the, he's in over his head and some of the stuff that I think is a little bit, it's easy to say that stuff when things aren't going well. It's like, I had a guy I used to know, he would always talk about, Brady Quinn is a deer in headlights. Like, no, Brady Quinn always looks like that. You only notice it when something bad happens. Like, Brady Quinn always had the same facial expression after every play. But some people only, and it's just kind of like, he's got a little bit of like this look on his face. But this guy would only notice it when Brady threw a pick or got sacked. And, deer in headlights. And I'm like, no, that's his face. It's like the scene from Maverick. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like the look on your face, Mav. It's the only one I got. You know what I mean? It's like, And that's how I feel like it's easy to pile on Marcus Freeman and, oh, you can't do, like, okay, but games like this are where that reputation is either crushed or you add fuel to the fire. And that's where it comes down to, is because you outcoach this team, you accomplish something. There's no question about it. And that's something I'm looking forward to on Saturday, Trevor.
Yeah, it shows that you as a head coach took the proper steps that you have been talking about, that we have all been hearing about, of I'm going to go and self-reflect and look in the mirror and dissect how we get ready for games. If you go and thoroughly outcoach a very well-coached Louisville team that has a good amount of talent, if you go out and do that, I think that's going to give a lot of the fans what they've been wanting to see, right? Because, like, I think that's why a lot of people left the Miami of Ohio game so unsatisfied. Yes, Notre Dame won by 25 points. And yes, they didn't allow a touchdown, but it just didn't feel like it because the things that we had been hearing didn't come to fruition. And Marcus Freeman has a really good opportunity to put a lot of those things to rest, that, yes, I can get this team prepared. And yes, I can get this team prepared for a home game and against a really good coaching staff. So I'm excited to see it, man, from top to bottom. Like I said, I am a sucker for a good chess match, like seeing what Mike Denbrock's going to do, and then you see what Ron English adjusts to it, and then you see what Mike Denbrock adjusts to the adjustment. I'm not going to get too tangled up here, but I like seeing that thing. That's one of the reasons why I love watching football. And regardless, I think the product on the field on Saturday is going to be awesome. So.
Well, Trevor, that's going to do it for today's show. 5 o'clock tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk. So, Trevor, he made his commitment to tomorrow's show. We will go live at 1 tomorrow. We went later today because I was still getting caught up on work, and I'm still not caught up on work I needed because yesterday was spent on that breakdown of the pass offense. But we'll be back on track tomorrow, 1 o'clock, at IB Nation's podcast. And then, of course, Thursday, Trevor, Ryan, and I will all be together, and we will talk about the keys to victory for Notre Dame to win this game, offense, defense. We'll make our predictions. Then, of course, Bill Bender and I will go live at 2 o'clock to preview the biggest games of the weekend. So make sure that you are locked into all those, and that's why you need to make sure that after you've hit the like button, that you've hit your notification bell for our podcast. It'll let you know when we go live. Also, make sure you're signed up for our message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We almost always post the links to our shows there. Sometimes, like, I don't know, today, we're not always there, but normally they are, which you can find all of that stuff at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And of course, Trevor's we're going to have we're going to start pumping out Louisville articles at irishbreakdown.com here moving forward the rest of the week as well. So you're going to get plenty of that talk, and we'll have a lot to discuss in tomorrow's midweek rundown. And of course, Trevor, it's going to be your first buy so hold tomorrow also.
It is.
Correct? So I'm excited about that. So make sure on the message board, that's for premium members only, boards.irishbreakdown.com. Make sure you go there and leave a submission, a buy, so hold. It's not a question. It's a submission that we're either buying it, we're selling it, or we're holding it. And we'll do that tomorrow after we do our Louisville Notre Dame breakdown. So check all that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Thanks for being with us today. And if you like what Trevor brings to the table, I don't know, in about 24 minutes, Trevor, I think you're going to be on with Sean Stiers on IB Nation Sports Talk tonight, talking more Notre Dame football. So y'all aren't going to get any more of me today, which is probably a good thing. But you can get more of Trevor tonight at 5 o'clock with Sean Stiers at IB Nation Sports Talk. So check that out, everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow, 1 o'clock, on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.